TWA Flight 800 investigation. A researcher and the author of a book about the crash offer their views of what caused the plane to explode over the Atlantic Ocean near Long Island in July 1996.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Well, good afternoon anyway. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Commander Bill Donaldson. I'm a member of ARAP, Associated Retired Aviation Professionals. Welcome to the first joint meeting of ARAP and FIRO. FIRO is Flight 800 Independent Researchers Association. We're going to do a joint presentation this afternoon, and I hope it will be enlightening, particularly to our media friends. I'll go through the agenda pretty quickly here. I want to introduce some of the members of both organizations. We'll go through those introductions, and then I'll pass it off to Mr. Stallcup, the chair of FIRO, who will be doing a technical briefing on new data that his organization received that depicts radar images that never before seen in the public pertaining to the crash of Flight 800. After he does his presentation with his group, I'll come back up here and I'll update the findings that ARAP has come up with in the last year. We have some particularly enlightening information, I believe. We also have two eyewitnesses that will follow, and then we'll have a question and answer period. So for introductions, I'd like to recognize certainly our senior aviator, I'm sure probably in the whole Washington area, Admiral Thomas Moore, past chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He's right here with us. ARAP's senior civilian member is Captain Howard Mann, who couldn't make it down from Long Island. Captain Mann's retired from TWA. He's a preeminent crash investigator, and he's been really invaluable in our efforts here. Rear Admiral Mark Hill is also a member of ARAP, and he's sitting right next to Admiral Moore. He's a distinction of being a submariner as well as an aviator, Admiral. I don't know whether General Parton is with us. I haven't seen him yet. Okay. Captain Al Mundo, I slighted him last time, and I can't believe I did that. Captain Al Mundo is the gentleman that actually flew the airplane in from Athens in the engineering seat before it left on the ill-fated flight that resulted in the crash. Al, where are you sitting? Over here. Al is fully qualified, and I need to emphasize this, in all the positions in the cockpit of the 747. The only reason he wasn't the captain of that last flight coming in is because of age restrictions and just before his retirement. I hope that's not a secret, Al. Okay. All right, so we're very happy to have him on board again, very enlightening. Of course, I've been with this thing, one of the biggest pains in the rear of the government, I guess, starting out. I was a commander in the Navy. I've got about a dozen crash investigations. I was a pilot for 25 years, a JAG investigator investigating the FAA at one point. I've actually done a missile investigation while on active duty in the Navy. Now, with us also, before I get to FIRO, we've got two eyewitnesses. Captain Bill Gallagher is sitting over here on the right. He was the skipper of the Sean Michael, a scallop boat, 10 to 14 miles to the west of the event. He'll come on with Mr. Ed Wagner is also an eyewitness. He'll be appearing towards the end of the presentation. And he was in Mauritius Bay fishing at the time of the incident. Now, for FIRO, Tom Stallcup, sitting right here at the head of the table. He's a doctoral candidate in physics, a graduate researcher in a magnet lab down at Florida State University. And it's his data that you'll be seeing next. Grant Stepton is an electrical engineer, University of Massachusetts. Where are you, Grant? Oh, he's right here. The right-hand man of Tom's. David Neal is up from North Carolina. He's another member of FIRO, and his lovely wife sitting there with him. So without further ado, Tom, I think I want to kick it over to you. You've got the first technical pitch.
Good afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, 3 years ago this summer, TWA Flight 100 exploded and crashed off the coast of Long Island. All 230 passengers and crew perished. Our hearts go out at this time to all the family members and friends of the victims. Immediately following the tragedy, reports of an object streaking through the sky before any explosions filled the newsrooms and subsequent news stories. Later, during FBI interviews, 102 eyewitnesses reported the origin of this streaking object. Later, during FBI interviews, 102 eyewitnesses reported the origin of this streaking object. 96 of the eyewitnesses said that this streak originated from the surface. However, the FBI concluded that all 96 of these eyewitnesses were mistaken. According to the FBI, the eyewitnesses collectively, yet independently, mistook the surface for an altitude of 2.6 miles, which was Flight 100's altitude at the time its transponder failed, which was most likely the initial explosion. What they saw, the FBI contends, was the plane itself in various stages of crippled flight. A weight imbalance caused by the loss of the forward fuselage was allegedly responsible for this climb. The reason for me standing here today is to inform the news media and the public of an inexplicably flawed official investigation into our nation's worst air disaster. At the FBI's final press conference on the tragedy, a dramatic CIA-produced animation was shown which allegedly depicted TWA 800's final moments of flight. This and subsequent NTSB animations were not based upon any available evidence, including the radar data, which I'll show you shortly, and the eyewitnesses, two of whom are here today. In fact, a few eyewitnesses commented on the animation. One is named Daryl Myron. After me asking him a question I asked him, I said, the CIA told you that what you saw was the plane itself climbing. Do you have a comment? His comment was, that's total fabrication. I asked the same question and repeated the same quote to Paul Runyon. Runyon said, yeah, right, coming off the water. What I saw was going up from the surface like a rising flare. Another item addressed will be the existence of over 30 surface vessels parallel and on bow to stern courses, either in or heading toward a nearby military warning zone, which was activated the day Flight 800 crashed. Not one of these ships changed speed or course during or after the tragedy. Other details include nearby aircrafts and high-speed wreckage items recorded by the ISLIP radar. So now I'm going to change my presentation to an overhead presentation and show you the radar data which was recorded by the ISLIP radar station in Islip, Long Island. It's also called the MacArthur Islip Airport. No, that's right. This one. Overhead. So here's our contact information if anyone is interested in contacting us or anyone in our organization. First, I'd like to show you the NTSB animation and how it conflicts with not only the radar data, but the simulation data. The NTSB animation was I wish I had it with me, it's a very, very short and narrow, like a telescopic viewpoint. You don't see the relative distances to the horizon. What I did was I calculated, I did frame-by-frame analysis and found, let me get my pointer if I can. This is what it showed. The aircraft exploded and went up and down. It went up to, according to the animation, 17,200 feet. But according to the scientists at the NTSB, it could not have climbed higher than 15,100 feet in the simulations. Now, according to the radar data, it didn't climb at all. The radar data indicates that the speed increased immediately following the initiating event. And as we all know, when we ride bicycles, if we go down a hill, our speed increases. When we go up a hill, it decreases. So if Flight 100 did climb after the first explosion and losing its nose, the data of the radar would have decreased. Its ground speed would have decreased. The radar data shows that ground speed increased. Go to the next slide, and I will show you the actual NTSB produced, if I can get it straight for you. This is actual from the NTSB Exhibit 13A. The circles represent the main wreckage. That's the plane without the nose. And this is what the NTSB radar analysts, these are the circles right here. The NTSB radar analyst said that the plane did this in time. Now this is position versus time. It's a little hard to understand. But if the slope is steep, that means the plane's going fast. If the slope is not so steep, that means the plane is going slower. And if the slope is flat, that means it's not moving at all. So this line represents when it hit the surface. Okay? It's a little hard to understand, but the basic principle is the same. This, you must understand, is what the NTSB radar analyst said was the main wreckage. Now I will show you what their simulation shows and compare that to the actual radar data. And if I can get it right for you, I apologize. Okay. Now here's that same plot you saw before, and this red line, I can't really tell it's red, I guess, but the red line represents the radar data. And this black line here, well, that's the simulation data. And it's clear to see that the simulation data does not follow the radar data. That tells most scientists that the simulation is wrong. So if you plot both, that was just, I think that was east-west position versus time. You can also do the same analysis on north-south position versus time, differentiate and get speeds versus time. And when you do that, you get this plot. This is what the radar data shows. The radar data shows plus or minus a couple, maybe 50 knots or so, that the plane increased speed to approximately 460 knots, if I can remember correctly, right after, in the first few seconds of flight. The simulation shows it decreasing immediately. Now, why would they show it decreasing? Well, remember, the animation showed the plane climbing. So the only way to do that, to climb that sharply, they had to decrease ground speed. But the radar data shows the ground speed increased. So the conclusion one could make was that the plane did not climb. Okay. Now this is a graph that's a little easier to understand. This is like a map. Okay. This is the radar data plotted east, I guess north-south versus east-west. On the left, you have north-south. So this is like, up here is north. Okay. This is the track of the aircraft. Now there were some anomalies that I noticed when I analyzed this radar data. There was a piece, or not, allegedly, it could be called a piece of the aircraft, but it was a radar hit, which was anomalous in the official theory. In the official theory, the center wing tank exploded, and that's what caused the crash. Now, the center wing tank is a low-velocity explosion. I don't think it can hurl something off the aircraft at speeds greater than the speed of sound by a couple of miles. Well, these two radar hits here show just that at least one wreckage item exited the plane at a speed in excess of Mach 2. That's these two hits here. And there are two hits, so it's less likely to be an anomaly. And, of course, it is an anomaly in the official theory. But anyway, just for your information. And that was never even stated at the NTSB public hearing. Now here's the radar data. I wish I had shown you what it actually looked like if you saw the NTSB report. You would see this. Actually, you would probably see this. Okay, there's Flight 100. There's the wreckage, and there were a few ships around at the time. Well, if you look at all the radar data, you notice that there's a few more ships than the NTSB led us all to believe. In fact, there were over 30 ships. And the incredible thing, like I stated earlier, I have to restate now, is that none of them responded to the Flight 100 tragedy. None of them changed course. None of them slowed down. None of them even sped up. They just kept right on going. And the incredible thing is they're going almost in parallel courses, most of them. And even the 30-knot track, which the FBI, the 30-knot track, I have to point out, is this one right here. It was the closest surface vessel to the crash at the time of the crash. This vessel, according to the FBI, has not been identified. All other vessels, according to the FBI, have, but the closest one hasn't, according to the FBI. Okay, and also I want to tell you, this is before the explosion. Flight 100 is not in the picture. The circle here represents where it's going to crash, okay? Flight 100's out here somewhere. It's off screen, but it's coming. Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. Long Island is about right here. It's about 10 miles away. It goes like this, okay? I should have labeled that, but we were pressed for time when I was getting ready for...
Talk about 105 with that.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Reed. This was the military warning zone I was telling everyone about earlier. This is a military warning zone known as Whiskey 105, or W105. It was activated the day of the crash. This warning zone appears to be where all the ships were heading, or most of the ships were heading. Now this is the same time period plus a little bit more, about maybe 5 or 10 minutes more. Now you see Flight 100 came on. Now you see, how did I get this radar data? Well, this radar data was obtained by the NTSB directly. The crosses, all the labels are down here. I hope you can all read them. The crosses are islip secondaries. It's a little technical. I'm not going to get into secondaries or primaries, but this is the path of Flight 100, and that's where the initiating event occurred. And basically, you can see the ships. Here's the third knot track. Remember, it was here. Now it's here. So that's where the third knot track was when the crash occurred. Right there. And all these other tic-tac-toe markers are where each ship was at the time of the accident. Now, you'll see other markers. Where's another one? Here's one right here. See this asterisk? The asterisk represents where each plane was at the time Flight 100 crashed. And you'll notice this plane here was the closest plane to the tragedy, if I'm right. Is that right, Commander?
I'm not sure what,
That's a P3, that's a Navy P3 Orion.
P3 and US Air 217.
Yeah, they're both pretty close. Closest Navy plane to the crash was this plane here, and you can see how close it is. Here's the second time period. That's after the crash. And notice, this is where the third knot track was. It didn't turn around. According to eyewitnesses, we have 2 that'll testify today. Explosion was huge. It was seen 20 miles away. This boat was 3 miles away, less than 3 miles away. These other boats, here and here, would have just looked off to the left and see it looked like the sun setting in front of them, a huge ball of fire falling to the ground. Every boat that's plotted on radar that I have found does nothing, keeps on going. While the citizens of East Moriches, as Ed Wagner will tell you later, when he was going in, he saw a bunch of boats going out. All the citizens were racing. Now, what happened? Can we help? None of these boats did that.
You haven't mentioned the speed of these.
Okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, the speeds of these boats are extremely fast for surface vessels. This is the closest vessel to the tragedy was going 30 knots. That, coupled with the fact that it was tracked by aircraft radar, suggests that it was, of course, a fast boat, and the aircraft radar tracking suggests that it could have been a large boat. That's not necessary, but one key point to that is that the ADAC was the first Coast Guard vessel to the tragedy. It's a large boat. The ADAC, I didn't see on here at all. I just didn't see any boats going there. But according to everyone, the ADAC did appear, and I believe him. I said the ADAC was there. But perhaps it was smaller than these boats.
You got something going 34.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, this is I'm going to tell you some speeds of vessels now. This was going 30 knots. This one here was going 34 knots. One up here, which was not labeled by the NTSB, was going 38 knots. This one was going 30 knots. And most of them were going around 17 knots, 20 knots, 22, 12, all various speeds. But there were many high-speed boats, and there were lots of them in high density out there at the time of the accident, and none of them responded. Another peculiarity was this plane, which I should have showed you along the way. But in any event, there was a plane that started out here, went out, came back, did a U-turn, went out again. All before, during, and after the tragedy. It wasn't a commuter plane because there was no place to land. It was over the ocean. So what it was, I'll leave that to the experts to identify. I don't know what it was, but it was going 300 knots. It accelerated from 100 knots to 300 knots in 30 seconds. It slowed down at about the same rate when it took the U-turn. That's all I know, is that it was most likely an aircraft which had high performance capabilities.
One more thing. Could you show us where the shipping lanes are?
Sure. One of the arguments that some people make is that it might have been on a shipping lane. And that's possible, but I did call the Coast Guard and I asked them where the shipping lane was. And I should have labeled on the graph. Again, I didn't, but if you watch the red marker here, I hope you all can see it. The shipping lane goes off in this direction. So if you see a ship on a shipping lane, it would normally travel one of these two courses. You can see that's about a 45-degree angle or greater difference than all the other ships. So most likely it was not on the shipping lane. Okay. Now I wanted to show you this because the FBI has stated that they didn't know what happened to the 30-knot track. It just went off a radar. Well, the radar data shows that it came within a half a mile of 3 of these other vessels. Or no, half a mile with one of them, and about within a mile of a third one. So it could have rendezvoused with 3 of these vessels. And right here, you see where the 30-knot track went. The next plot I will show you will be this square blown up. Here it is. That's the square. So here's the 30-knot track. It came down here. There's a couple more points from the 30-knot track here. And here's 3 other vessels. This is their position, not at the time of the crash. This is about 15 minutes after the crash. This is their position relative to one another. So the 30-knot track could have rendezvoused with a few of these other ships that were headed toward the military warning zone. And this is that strange aircraft I've told you about taking one of his U-turns. He turned this way, went out here, and came back again. And to show you the data that I based my high-performance description on the aircraft, it's right here. This is the mystery aircraft, which ended, on one of its trips, went up, slowed down to around 70 knots here, took a left turn, took a right turn, went up here, took a U-turn around 100 knots, and increased its speed from 100 knots to 300 knots in about 30 seconds. And this is the graph, the data that showed that, where I got that information from. Is this a derivative? You take a derivative of position versus time, you get speed versus time. And that's what this graph is. So here's the speed. Here's 100 knots. Here's traveling along at 250 knots, drops, goes across, increases. Okay, and the time that it takes to increase is about 30 seconds. So evidence that it's a high-performance aircraft. And that's basically the end of the radar data. But to end on a better note, or a note that's easier to understand to most people, we're going to show a animation based on this radar data. And this animation was created the day I left Tallahassee to come up here. It didn't cost $40,000 to produce like the CIA animation, but so it's not as good quality, but it does basically show what the radar data shows. And it's a lot easier to understand if you see things moving. So I'm going to have a computer animation here. Oh, sorry. Yeah. And there's one human error in this computer animation. One of the arrows that I gave the animator, he got reversed. So this ship here was not going through the tragedy. This ship actually didn't even exist. So all the ships, everything here existed. Here's a U-turn. Okay? This is that aircraft. And this is after Flight 100 crashed. Dave, can you go ahead and stop that and just start it from the beginning so I can... Okay. Oh, yeah. How'd that happen? I'm going to turn off the lights. Okay. All right. I'll try to stand over here. Huh? Okay. Yeah, I'll just leave it there. I'll just stand off to the side. Okay, now it's important to understand the time frame. The time frame based on this animation is about 30 minutes, okay? So disregard, this is our time. This is the time for us. That's not how long it took. It took 30 minutes. You see the time here? And here's what time it was. Now right here is where Flight 100 crashed. Here comes Flight 100. It crashed. And this airplane didn't respond. Neither did any of the boats. It took his U-turn, slowed down to 100 knots, accelerated to 300 knots, and continued. This went back and forth. As far as I know, that thing was going back and forth all night. All the radar data. I only have 30 minutes of radar data. During the entire 30 minutes, that plane's going back and forth. Does it 3 times. Third knot track is continuing away, just like I explained before. It's the same data as before, only in animation form. So, in conclusion, yeah, it's going back. All right, now we're at the beginning of the animation again. I'll just go through the animation one more time. The boats are heading towards Whiskey 105, which is a military-activated warning zone at the day of the crash.
Meaning what?
Meaning it's a possibility of live fire exercises, including the possibility of missiles.
Commercial ships, vessels should stay out.
Commercial ships and vessels should stay out. And these two aircraft, by the way, were not identified by the NTSB. This is the first time this is publicly available. These aircraft were never even mentioned in the NTSB report. This one was not mentioned, nor the one that came racing down and was very close to TWA when it crashed.
How much did the NTSB show up to know?
Excuse me?
How much of that picture did the NTSB reveal?
The question is, how much of this picture did the NTSB reveal? And I'll try to trace it myself. To the best of my recollection, it showed 16 miles below the tragedy. I went down to around 35. So the NTSB cut off the animation right here. Cut off the graph. They didn't, yeah, right.
Any altitude information on that aircraft? You want to do U-turns?
This is primary radar data. That's the difference between primary and secondary radar. This data comes from primary radar data. There's no altitude information. All I can get is speed. Okay. What's primary and secondary radar data? Primary radar data is radar data that reflects. If you shine a light up in the dark sky, a flashlight, you might see a moth. The reason you see a moth is because it's reflecting light. That's primary radar data. Now, if that moth had a little, maybe it's a firefly, and when it gets hit by a flashlight, it blinks. And then when it hits by the flashlight, you see it blink because that's its reaction to the flashlight. That's secondary radar data. Basically, all planes, or most of them anyway, the commercial ones and military ones, have a transponder. And when they get hit by radar data, they send back a signal. I am flight 100. I'm at 13,700 feet. You know, here I am. That's what a transponder does. That's secondary radar data. And they also give altitude information like you were just asking. So this is primary radar data. So we don't have any altitude information. Except we knew that flight 100 was at 13,700 feet from the secondary radar data. Yes?
Does that mean that that plane did not have a transponder? Or simply did
That suggests that the plane didn't have a transponder. What also suggests that it didn't have a transponder was that it was not labeled on the NTSB plots, which did include the area it covered.
most commercial flights would have a transponder?
I think all commercial flights have transponders.
Most commercial flights don't do
Yeah, and most commercial flights don't do U-turns.
Mr. Stalco?
Yes.
The NTSB says that the radar data has been available in the public record since April of 1998.
Yes.
Why have you waited until now to analyze the data that's been in the public record and to reveal your conclusions from it?
Yes, that's an excellent question, and it's false. I've been trying to get the radar data for the last 2 years. I called the FAA directly, spoke to a gentleman by the name of Fred Valerio at JFK Airport, who was responsible for releasing this very radar data. And I said, can I get the data? And he said, well, send an FOIA request. I sent an FOIA request, never got it back, called a month later, said, why didn't you send me the radar data? He said, I never got the request. By that time, we got to know each other and to talk, and he said, you know, you're never going to get it. And I said, why? He said, that's direct orders from the NTSB. So the NTSB gave the FAA direct orders not to release the data. However, that's inconsistent with the NTSB exhibit items, which say that the data is available. But if you go to their website, you won't find the data. It's not there. You might be able to call them now that this press conference is happening, now that reporters are calling them, they may go ahead and give you the data. It's already too late. You know.
So where'd you get the data?
I got the data from the NTSB directly through a source that I had. He's the radar analyst at the NTSB.
Is this person a whistleblower, or are you willing to identify the person?
I'm not going to identify him on camera. I'm going to keep it off the record for now. But this radar analyst was, I don't want to give it away by telling what he did, but he was one of the head radar analysts at the NTSB.
Was. Why doesn't
Why he still works there, and I want to keep it that way.
Is he a whistleblower?
P3 Orion show up on your animation?
That's a good question. Well, what I wanted to do here was to show what planes did the NTSB not identify. I showed Flight 100 and these two planes. They didn't identify them. Everyone knew that the P3 was there, so I didn't think it was really relevant. I'm trying to show the new data that hasn't been released.
Could you run the faster animation and explain it?
Sure. Okay, Dave. Okay, hold on just a second while we use this computer. Great thing about computers. Okay, what happened, Dave? Okay, here's the faster one. The faster one will help us understand what the ships did and how they did respond, but the airplanes will look like, you know, rockets. See the airplane going by? Sorry about that. Try to make it bigger for you. All right, it's not going to auto-repeat, is it? Okay, so here we go. We're going to start from scratch. Just keep your eyes on the ships and just see what they do when Flight 100 crashes.
How much faster than real-time eclipse?
Hold on a second. Okay, here comes Flight 100. That's their reaction. So, Dave Neal, a colleague of mine, just asked me how much faster than this is real time. Well, you just saw in 15 seconds what took place in 30 minutes. Okay, so and plus, oh, another thing, these are not actual sized ships. Okay, these are ships just so you people can see where they are at the time. Okay, the size of the ships in reality were the size of a couple pixels. Okay, we're looking at around 35 by 35 square miles here. Okay, so those aren't the size of ships. I just want to make it clear that these are where they were. Of course, that's not the size of the airplanes either.
The ship that was closest, how fast was it going? How close was it?
The question was the ship which was closest, how fast was it going, and where did it go? Well,
Yeah,
anyway,
how close was it?
the ship, okay, the ship at the time of the initial explosion was 2.9 nautical miles from the accident. And I can put the overhead up later to actually, well, it's over there also, if you can get a light over there, but okay. Here's where it is. I don't know if you can see right here. It's not very good. But you see that little marker? That's a 30-knot track. That's the closest ship. And that's where Flight 100 blew up. So that's 2.9 nautical miles. But we're going to, I'm going to just take a couple more questions.
What's the implication, again, of that ship being only 2.9 nautical miles and the speed and the direction?
Okay, yeah. Commander Donaldson's made a good point. We have a tight schedule here, and we're going to have a lot more questions later. It's a good question, but Commander Donaldson can also address it. So I'm going to hand this over to Graham Sefton, who has a quick statement to make on AFIRO's behalf. And then there'll be a complete question and answer session after the eyewitnesses.
Tom, do you have any handouts? Do you have any of these charts that you can pass out?
Yes, I'll have to make copies. If anyone's interested... Yeah, you're right. They can also go to a website and see this also. So I'm going to hand it over to Graham Sefton. Go ahead. Here, Graham. Talk to the microphone.
Sure. I'm a telecommunications engineer by training and profession. I worked for some years on radar-based atmospheric research. I've been investigating this accident because many in the media decided that it was too hard or too technical or too time-consuming or less marketable than Monica Lewinsky's scandal, perhaps. I have been investigating this accident for about 2 years and I've been investigating this accident because I realized that government agencies were not doing it. Primarily, the FBI and the NTSB have been dealing with the inquiry for just over 3 years. And I want to acknowledge that many public servants in the ranks toiled heroically and professionally to do their jobs, to do a good one. I've talked to many and I know. And I'd like to add a little clarification on, without contradicting Tom, his efforts to get the radar data. I was also making efforts at the time, and as he said, officially that data was available for public release at the information office. And when I went to the information office and said, well, can I have it? They said, yeah, sure. And then some months later they said, well, we'd lost it. So this process takes ages and ages and ages. Even though the NTSB says it's publicly available, it is now probably. But the information office said they'd lost it. Eventually they got it. They had to shuffle all sorts of things, and finally they found it. So available, and what had been shown up till this point, it was a very windowed sort of a picture that this public information had been given before. My problem with the investigation, the official investigation, is it's designed from the top down. It's tightly compartmentalized in a way that obscures and bottles up important details like these. It was an investigation led by theories rather than led by evidence. In the last year and a half, our group of independent researchers has filed Freedom of Information Act requests, as Tom mentioned. We've written letters, we've written articles, we've telephoned people involved at all levels of this. We even submitted testimony to the House Aviation Subcommittee. Nothing until now has got this investigation back onto the radar or over the horizon. And our testimony is, in fact, on our website, so let me plug that there. As I said, I'm a technical person, one of many, but as many of you folk here would appreciate, we're not sophisticated media managers, and that is the problem with this investigation up till now, is it was very well managed on the media level. Public relations departments of government agencies did a very good job in portraying people who were independent researchers and independent journalists and freelance journalists as kooks or opportunists or people trying to make money out of this. All of the people I'm involved in have spent a lot of time and got no pecuniary reward. So to conclude, I've learned much about realpolitik, and I've become convinced of the wisdom. I think it was Thomas Jefferson whose belief in the necessity of an effective watchdog press. I don't believe governments are intrinsically dishonest, but the press is an absolutely essential function, has an essential function for preventing bureaucratic excesses and lapses. 3 years, $40 million of taxpayer money, and no conclusion. And no conclusion has been reached. In conclusion, even though I know a lot about this tragedy, I am not certain of what caused the accident. But if people demand that the government open up the records and share the details, even the awkward ones, I'm certain the mystery will be solved. At this stage, it's a manufactured mystery, and that's why we're here today. Thank you. Bruce.
Thank you, Graham. Manufactured mystery. What a great phrase. Ladies and gentlemen, air crashes are not rocket science. We're not building a Saturn V to go to the moon. What's happened here is an affront to 96 years of American aviation technology. It's a cover-up. I want to go through what ARAP, give you a snapshot of where we stand right now. If you go to our website, TWA800.com, you're going to see more data, more articles, more stuff than you're going to care to read. We're going to update that in short order that'll cover things that we're going to talk about here. TWA800.com. I want to make a side comment here, too. There's something about the American media. In the last 3 weeks, I've entertained British journalists, German journalists and television crews, and French journalists and no TV. If you'll check Paris Match today, this meeting is a main article, front page treatment. The question I've got for American media is, why isn't that the case in our own main media? And you'll see why when I get into some of these things we found.
Bill, Insight Magazine.
Insight Magazine. Well, that's right. Kelly O'Mara. I hadn't read that article, but there's one either coming out. Is that it, or been out?
It'll be on their website today. It's on the newsstands.
Good. Insight Magazine.
Thursday. They can't hear me.
Okay, and you'll say it'll be on the newsstand today or
Monday.
By Monday?
Website.
On the website. Okay, today. I want to go through quickly here a status report. I want to talk about witnesses, forensic evidence, evidence of a cover-up, the congressional testimony that we gave, and absolutely was panned by everybody except Channel 12 on Long Island. First of all, through our independent efforts, we've identified approximately 140 witnesses now. These witnesses surrounded the missile engagement, and I mean that literally, because two of the last ones we brought on board were actually a mile above the missile engagement and U.S. Air Flight 217. These witnesses, there isn't any other way to say it, they've been libeled by their own government. I don't want to put the two fellows we've got here on the spot today, but I'm telling you, any crash investigator that's got any credentials that had access to this body of witnesses would have known what the FBI knew very quickly, and that's the airplane was engaged from a missile fired from the surface. People that don't know each other and 360 degrees around the compass essentially are giving us extremely similar comments. Another strange factor, when we identify these people, the first question I've got, have you been interviewed by the FBI? If so, how many times? Roughly, in what I've found, about 20% of these individuals have not been identified or not been debriefed by the FBI. I found that extremely unusual because there are two figures the FBI throws out. 700 agents. Mr. Kellstrom, the deputy director, is using that now in the press. He's also on record with Reed Irvine that they had 1,000 agents there on Long Island looking up these witnesses, and yet they don't talk to 18% of the ones we found. Their testimony is consistent with a Stinger missile launch. The majority, or that type of missile, a shoulder-fired missile, short-range air defense system, a launch southeast of the aircraft from 2 to 3 miles. I would go into court today with the amount of evidence that I've got to support that theory. I don't believe it's a theory. I think it's a fact. The witnesses give us the time of burn on the missile. They call it a flare. I saw a flare go up 3 to 5 seconds. It was going north-northeast, okay? Or it was, depending on where the perspective of the witness was, it was going in some other heading. When you put it all down, it's the same missile. The burn time gives you the type of missile because a Stinger, for instance, burns for 5.5 seconds, and it is very visible. There's a lot of government disinformation out there. You hear things like, well, they couldn't see a Stinger. That's wrong. You can see a Stinger in those conditions 20 miles away. The sky was relatively clear. It was a very good weather day. Angle of climb, where these people pointed on the surface, is consistent. Now, how does somebody 15 miles apart give you the same angle of climb, the same burn time, and the same end results? I know there are FBI agents that knew what they were being told. They were relatively junior. Some of them were in trouble because they answered questions that got turned around at the FBI when I took those answers and had the Congress ask questions. That's how the 30-knot contact was identified, was originally a conversation between an FBI officer and our investigators, me. The earlier question, what's the significance of a contact being 2.9 nautical miles away? It's because it's in range of shoulder-fired weapons. It's in range of later staged Stinger missiles. It's in range of the Chinese Vanguard. It's in range of the SA-14, the SA-16, and the SA-18. And the military told the FBI that. I've got the data. I've got the computer runs that tell them. The military also told them that this type of weapon would steer for, fired in front, particularly in where that 30-knot target was, would steer for the center of the aircraft because they're hot vents right underneath the center wing tank that heat-seeking missile would go to. Let me switch from eyewitnesses alone would probably convince a jury. The data is that good if you have experts that understand what they're telling you, missile experts. Let's go to forensic evidence. We've seen multi-million-dollar, what do they call it, Jetosaurus Rex or something up there at Calverton, a huge reassembly job. But I liken it to the parlor game. You know, the walnut shell with the peas under it, there's 3 of them. They kept saying center wing tank, center wing tank, center wing tank, and they rebuilt the center wing tank. The center wing tank shows a lot of damage, but that's not where the missile hit the airplane. The forensic evidence shows the missile entered the front of the number 2 main tank. And I've got this is not a $10 million model, believe me, we're on a limited budget. The center wing tank is in the section of the wing that goes through the fuselage. Government's theory is that this kerosene magically heated up and blew itself up. The number 2 tank goes out to about the number 2 engine from the side of the aircraft, right here. You haven't heard this before, But right in the front of this wing, all of this leading edge fillet here is a frangible aluminum honeycomb. It was found first in the debris field, okay? Right behind that is the the forward spar, which is also the forward wall of this huge #2 tank. It's all this red part here is the tank. That tank is 6 feet deep, roughly. There's a hole of missing metal yet to be found. 45 square feet of missing metal right there, okay? What you see in red on the top of this wing is a very peculiar anomaly, one the NTSB won't touch with a 10-foot pole, and the FBI discounted. The only military report written looking at this damaged aircraft of the left wing provided 4 criteria that said if a shoulder-fired weapon like a Stinger hit in any one of these main tanks and detonated in the tank, one of the things that would happen is that the wing skin would be blown off the tank hydraulically. All right? Guess what? Left wing, all 3 tanks in the left wing, the #2 main, the #1 main, and the #1 reserve, have a very peculiar blown out upper skin. I cannot overemphasize this. This is forensic evidence. It cannot happen in any normal crash scenario. You have to have the introduction of high explosives or a very high energy impact by a missile body. And what it does, it hydraulically overpressurizes this tank. If it hits in the #2, it's translated in through the common metal walls between all these tanks, hydraulically blows up the top of the wing skin, and guess what? It blows into the center tank. And then the center tank blows up, because the center tank was empty, a few gallons of fuel in it. Not only did the center tank blow up, but the space below the center tank blew up. There's 2 or 3 feet of empty airspace underneath that tank, and the reason we know that is when they recreated the center tank, put it back together, there's a big dent in the bottom of the center wing tank. How could that happen? Did the tank explode, reassemble, and land on something on the water and make a dent in it? If you reassemble something that blew apart and it's got a dent in it, that, by common sense, had to happen first. So stick with the scenario, because the China Lake Naval Air Weapons Facility wrote a 19-page report. It took them a year. They call it an engineering snapshot. They identified not only this anomaly, but 3 others that are unexplained on this aircraft. The very first recommendation was to take a 747 tank, inboard tank, and detonate the weapon inside the fuel tank, full of water, for safety reasons. See if the fuel stops those little tiny steel slivers, the fragments from the warhead. I'll give you the answer. The answer is yes. They're small warheads. Fuel is 700 times more dense than air. The fragments would stop within a couple of feet. Okay? The first recommendation. Second recommendation, take a full-size aircraft with a pressurized cabin and fire real, live, shoulder-fired missiles at those inboard tanks and see what happens. And then you take that damaged aircraft and you look at what happened and what they found on Flight 800. Why haven't you heard about this? You haven't heard about it because when Mr. Kellstrom got the report, he shut down the FBI investigation. He cherry-picked statements out of that report that basically said, well, the airplane doesn't have any big pockmarked typical holes of a shoulder-fired weapon hitting it somewhere else and ragged edges and so forth. The problem is he got to the point where he had to do the test. He only had 2 options. If he did the test, it would prove or disprove whether the airplane was engaged by a missile. If he didn't drop and he had people inside his own investigation that were pushing this very hard. They lost. The other thing that's come out very recently, when I was assisting with the Sanders situation up in New York, we were able to get pictures of the common wall between this #2 tank and the center tank has the same metal wall. I asked Mr. Sanders to take some pictures up there. The judge let him take pictures of some of the wreckage at his choice. When I looked at the pictures, it was obvious to me that that wall, that center tank wall, right with the number 2 main, hadn't exploded out from the center tank, but had exploded into the center tank. I called the NTSB. I said, where's your edge metal analysis? They can look at it under a microscope. They can not only tell you which tank exploded first, but how much load was on that metal when it failed, and how fast did it build up. In other words, if there was a high explosive overpressurization, it would be captured on the streaks of the metal on the broken edge of those metal parts. I got a call back in 15 minutes from a lawyer. None of the scientists would talk to me. And the attorney tried to talk metal with me. He says, well, you know, now this is 3 years after all these people died. He says, well, you know, our people can look at this metal with a jeweler's loop, and they can determine and just move on if it's not important. I said, I'll tell you what, partner. If they did that with this theory, this preposterous theory that you put on the board, that kerosene exploded at 13,700 feet, they're going to move right on to misprison of felony homicide charges or malfeasance charges. Because the very first thing you do when you say a tank explodes, prove it. I'm not talking about the breakup sequence of the aircraft. That's what they keep touting. If this tank explodes, the center tank has got to explode. That's the way it works. I've been fired at by missiles. I've fired missiles. Anytime you have a near-empty tank, it's going to explode if high explosive ordnance goes off near it. Forensic evidence. It's in the metal, as Mr. McKinney used to remind me from Aviation Week. Have they done the tests? No. Why not? Have they done what the military recommended? No. Are they going to do it? I suggest they do. Okay, other evidence of a cover-up. I have a tendency to get on a high horse here, Reed. Just, you know, throw something at me if I get rocking and rolling too much. Okay. Dr. Shanahan. Dr. Shanahan is a military medical pathologist. He examined in great detail all of the victims of this crash. One of the things in his report he forwarded to the FBI was the supposition, if the initiating event is in the center tank and there's enough energy and explosive force to cause the breakup of this aircraft, then people sitting right above that tank should be burned in certain ways. Some of them weren't burned at all. He surmised that just maybe the event that caused the destruction of the aircraft was not at the center tank, and the aircraft began to break up. People were thrown clear of the aircraft before the center tank exploded. Bingo. Dr. Shanahan, I believe, was correct. That's thrown out. His testimonies never made it, or his reports never made it into the public record as far as I'm aware. The CIA fraudulent video. And I'm going to use words, I'm going to say what I believe. What Tom presented here is an excellent piece of evidence that would stand up in a courtroom. For somebody to put together a multi-thousand-dollar media extravaganza and feed it to the U.S. media the way that was done at one of the biggest press conferences the FBI ever held, it's scurrilous. If you can't back it up with radar data, there's something seriously rotten in Denmark here. Okay, he's found that. There's another little tidbit. There was the little ship that could down there that next morning, right after Flight 800 went in. Its name is the Rudy. National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration ship Rudy. I've debriefed the captain. It took him a while, but he got the last transponder data point. He found out where the aircraft exploded in space. He got the basic data, the weight, the direction the aircraft was flying, and the altitude. Well, that little ship is designed to find things underwater. It's only about 90 feet long, crew of 11. He's got sophisticated computers on board. Plugs in the data. Mr. Computer, give me a ballistic fall on this object. The computer spits the data out. He takes the ship over to that very spot on the ocean and lights off the side scan sonar. And what does he find? He finds that huge piece of rear fuselage and the wing and engines and everything else that the CIA said climbed 3,000 feet, flew around for 40-some seconds. Wrong. The computer said it fell like a stone, exactly like a stone, going that speed and of that weight. So now you have two scientific observations that are locked in, that are in direct contrast to what the CIA. So why did they produce this thing? They produced it to discredit people like our witnesses that are going to speak here today, to explain away what they saw in space before the aircraft exploded. Another series of videos that was fraudulent. This time the NTSB contracted, and I'm not sure which university, I won't name the university that did it. One of the things we pointed out very early on is that the kerosene fuel in this aircraft cannot do what the NTSB said it did. Never will, never did. They went through the trouble of doing flight testing to see if they can get an explosive tank, center tank, without any other causes, like a bomb or a missile. They flew the flight tests, come back and land, gather up all the data. They come to the public hearing and make this great declaration. Well, the tank was flammable at 14,000 feet. Now, the average person that says, well, yeah, okay, it can blow up. There's a problem with that, because the Aviation Fuels Manual, the handbook that I took to Congress and read to Mr. Trafficant one evening for 5 hours, says that that won't happen. You won't get an explosion. You might get a flammable tank, as they found in the flight testing, above 14,000 feet. What altitude was the airplane at when it exploded? It was exactly 13,820 feet, plus or minus 5 feet. All right? Now, you hand scientific test data to a public relations guy in the NTSB, and he turns the tank that is flammable above 14,000 feet into an airplane that exploded. The explosion, the atmosphere is different than flammable tank. All right? The vapor in that fuel is 6 times heavier than air. You can literally not light the tank with a match, holding it just above the surface of the fuel until the plane climbs above 14,000 feet. And if you were in the tank, what would happen is you get a slow blue pool of fire above 14,000 feet would go out above the surface of the fuel. When I first got in this, I talked to some of the best petroleum experts in the country. And before the politics got involved in this, and before the NTSB stirred the whole thing up, they basically said if the tank was able to be lit, you would have a flame on the surface, and the fire would eventually go out. How do you go from flammable to an explosion in the center tank that the one Boeing engine, and one of the best statements I've ever heard when he saw the CIA thing, do you think that can happen? He said, I don't know where they got their data. Another one said, there's not enough energy in the tank. Okay.
That's a quote.
Yeah, a quote from the NTSB. Thank you, Tom. He said, flammability is not a useful characteristic of explosion hazard. Well, that's true, because what it really means is when you finally, instead of the fire going out when you dip it in the fuel, I've done that. I've been on C-SPAN. I've shown it to people. You can put lit matches out in the fuel, Their own flight test says that'll happen until 14,000 feet. The airplane never got there. This is a fraud. Excuse me. Tell me when I'm on the soapbox, will you? Okay. Let me go through a few more. All right. 6-day delay in doing the recovery of the crash. This is really unusual. The next morning, the citizens of Long Island, the commercial folks that were around there, they were doing everything they could to help recover the possible bodies, crash debris. It so happens that some of the biggest salvage companies in the world were contracted by the FAA the night of the crash, and also by the Coast Guard, contacted by the Coast Guard. What happened? They get there with equipment far superior than what the Navy eventually showed up with, and they were stonewalled. For 2 or 3 days, they sat around, and finally, the Navy's going to come do it. So everything sat on the bottom for 5.5, 6 days. Nobody heard a pinger from these, the pinger locator for the black boxes. When the Navy finally recovered the black boxes, the divers I've talked to said the pingers weren't working. That's a huge malfunction, because those pinger locators are supposed to tell the NTSB where to go, even down to 10,000 feet underwater, and they usually work, even to those kind of depths. They're about as reliable as a Timex watch. Neither one was working. The divers found the boxes laying on the sand, hard bottom. They stepped on them. There was no debris on top of them. They weren't working. They were handed over to the FBI, taken off finally and checked in the laboratory. Alas, there's nothing wrong with them. There's a miracle cure on the 2 pinger locators on the black boxes while they were in the custody of the FBI. And the NTSB is mute. They don't say a word about it. Why? Okay. Well, let me talk quickly about the congressional testimony. I walked into to the Aviation Subcommittee on the 6th of May with physical evidence. Physical evidence of a cover-up. And the cover-up was the fact that for for 6 months, the FBI was running a trawling operation in the close proximity of the explosion point of Flight 800 with scallop trawlers, a total of 5 of them. At any one time, 4 of them were out there, 24 hours a day. Each one was manned with 2 FBI agents. I went up to the scalloper, the Alpha Omega in Massachusetts. Captain Billy Manley, I believe, was a skipper. He took me to the quarters that the FBI agents had occupied during those 6 months. We pulled every drawer, turned it upside down. I found a manual, FBI manual. In it is an operations order to these agents that were manning these boats. They were looking for 3 specific things. The cover story is they're trying to recover remains of victims. They're trying to clean the bottom, I guess for the environmentalists. They're trying to get all the last parts. There's one legitimate part listed in there, and that's the last fuel pump that supposedly hadn't been found from the center wing tank. But there's 2 other things they were looking for. The most dramatic being the first stage of a Stinger missile. This is the drawing. You may be able to see that the missile, when it comes out of the tube, these fins open up. So this drawing is showing the first stage that only fires while it's in the tube. It kicks the missile out of the tube. When the main 5-foot-long missile fires, it kicks this first stage off and it drops in the water. So the FBI knew, because of witnesses and because of what the military told them to look for that. The next interested item is a battery that is a throwaway item on the Stinger missile. Let me read you a quick instruction. Items of interest are in the attachments section. If one of these items is recovered, notify the command post immediately, but be discreet while on the phone so as not to alert the crew. Okay, down on the bottom, they enjoin the agents to use secure phones so that interested parties will not know that the United States government is looking for missile parts in a 2.7-mile radius around the explosion point of Flight 800. Now, if I could get that this is the actual map that I got from a crewman on the Alpha Omega. You're not going to be able to see it in the back, but this is the explosion point of the aircraft. Out to this distance is 2.7 nautical miles. On here is a red ring. I'll go back to the microphone. There's a red ring that goes around a perfect circle at 2.7 nautical miles. I'll do the circumference here. There it is. That's the explosion point, the last transponder pickup on radar. See? Okay. These pale-colored areas here are actually two-scale trawling lines that were done by precision trawling using GPS equipment, very expensive equipment. The Navy Supervisor of Salvage was on board helping these skippers do an exact trawling line. They went over and over a lot of things, but right here is a statement, 2.7 nautical miles, suspected missile firing zone, FBI. Okay, this little triangle here is an NTSB interest item because they think maybe that pump fell into this area. But look, the debris field is here, basically. What are they doing trawling up here? The reason is that the shooter, I believe, from what the witnesses are telling us, was in this area. And the military experts tell me, even if the warhead goes off on one of these small missiles in the tank, the missile body will go through it like a hot knife through butter. And it would be found in this quadrant up here. This is an early map. When the FBI went out they actually contracted the Alpha Omega. And when they did, they walked aboard with some of these pictures and said, have you ever seen anything like this? Crewman on the Alpha Omega says, yep, last month. I found one of those and threw it back overboard. He was talking about a first stage of a shoulder-fired missile. They interrogated him for over 6 hours, 2 or 3 times on the boat. From my military sources, missile guidance people are telling me that FBI agents that were on the track of this thing said it didn't just happen on the Alpha Omega, it happened on another one too. Where was the Alpha Omega? A month before the FBI came aboard and started this search? Right about here. So what they did is they added on these other search areas here that are not hatched in yet. They hadn't been done. Did they find the part? I don't know. They suddenly shut this thing down on the 30th of April, 1998. The skippers on board thought it was going to go on another year. And the FBI shut it down like slamming a door. And they were out of the program. Okay. I think I've been on my high horse long enough here. Why don't we go ahead and have one of our witnesses come up. Ed Wagner, you want to step up to the microphone? If you can get out of there, it's kind of narrow confines. Remember, Ed is one of about 140 people that we've been able to identify that had the, I don't know whether you'd call it a privilege. They happened to be at the wrong place at the right time or whatever. But Ed, I want you to relax, and I want you to try and tell them what you can recall of what you've seen. Okay, well, go ahead, and I'll stay here.
The night of the shoot-down, and I believe it was a shoot-down, I was in the Mauritius Inlet, which is really just 2 jetties. There's 2 spits of Well, south part of Long Island has a barrier, and it's just a hole in it with jetties. And I was on the north side of the jetty and on the west side. I was facing basically to the south and to the east. And what I saw, and my fishing partner saw, who just does not want to be involved with this, was a streak of light that came from the horizon and went skyward at about somewhere between 30 degrees and 60 degrees, if you count 0 as straight up. And we watched it go up, and we talked about it, and we said, well, you know, this could be a distress flare. We're going to have to go around a corner. And by that, I mean we'd have to go out in the ocean and make a left, east, to see who shot the thing off. And we said, well, distress is red, not white. And so we took our eyes off it, we talked, and then as we looked up again, I saw two distinct, close by, orange-yellow lights coming down from the west to the east. I supposed it was a light flare that whose parachute got on fire. I mean, up until I went home, I had no idea about what I saw. But I can tell you that I did see a white, what I thought was a flare, going skyward. Now, I don't have a radio on my boat, which is probably not a real good idea. But as we were going in, there were a lot of boats, civilian boats, heading out towards the ocean. And we thought, well, it could be a start of a shark tournament. It could be anything. And that's about what I saw.
Ed, you're saying that the flare you saw was not going on the same course that the aircraft went down? Is that, do I get you right? You're going left to right where you were?
Right. I was from my left to my right like this, and that in real time was from the east to the west. And the jet, what turned out to be the jet, was coming from the west and going east. And probably at well, it was probably in that same 30-degree arc from, if you have a straight up and down line, 30 degrees like this and down.
You mentioned the flare was white. Now, do you mean that they left a trail, or?
Yeah, not a continuous, not a great, huge continuous trail, but it was a streak, as you would reckon a streak to be, as you look up. If you saw a meteor coming down, the way a streak looks from a meteor, well, it looked the same way going up.
Was the streak light?
It was white.
Light or white would mean exhaust, perhaps, from a rocket.
Well,
It looked like a white flare to you?
well, yeah, it was white. White, maybe a little bit to the silver side of white.
How about speed? Was it going faster or slower than an airplane normally out there?
From when I saw it to when I stopped looking at it was probably about 4 or 5 seconds. Then I turned away from it, and then when we looked back up again, that's when we saw what turned out to be the jet coming down.
Commander Donaldson, can you explain why it's the left wing that's involved? If from where you think the Stinger missile or whatever it was fired, why?
I didn't want to get too technical in this, but one of the things the military did is China Lake took infrared pictures right at the same light spectrum, 3 to 5 microns, that the seeker head on a Stinger or equivalent would seek. Okay. When they took those pictures of the 747, they were surprised to find that the same hot air conditioner packs that the NTSB is blaming for heating up the center tank actually spit 450-degree air into the hot air right underneath the belly of the aircraft. And when you look at the IR imagery, you get 3 bright white dots. Missile guidance people are telling me, and I've got to agree with them, that fired from a low angle. Remember, that aircraft is over 2 nautical miles high. The exact firing solution from that unidentified 30-foot boat is 37 degrees angle up. Okay, the missile coming at that angle would see most likely the bottom belly hot spots that the military identified for the FBI, and they didn't act on. Okay? So what you really need to do is ask Ed questions if you got them for him, and we'll have the next witness come up.
Marichi's Inlet, that was about 10 miles away from the crash. Was Marichi's Inlet about 10 miles from the crash?
Yeah, correct. Yes, it was. Almost exactly 10 miles. Can you get this? Flip it over the back. Okay. Let me, roughly, we should have done this to begin with. Here's the track of the aircraft depicted here with the explosion point, these two round circles. Here's where the 30-knot unidentified boat was relative to that. I think I've got you depicted pretty close here, right, Ed? Okay, Mauritius Inlet is right there, what he's talking about, and he was just inside there, okay? And Captain Billy Gallagher is going to come up next, and he was back here on the Sean Michael.
What was the point of origin of the object you saw streaking up? Was it beyond, was it south of the plane, or?
Well, it would have been way east of the plane. From my vantage point, facing south, would put the jet pretty much.
Remember,
to my right.
The aircraft was not here when the missile was fired. The aircraft is approaching this. So what he's saying is that he sees something streaking up from the east, from this side. The aircraft doesn't get there until the missile does, which is about a 10-second time of flight if it was a Stinger fired from that position, at least according to the military computer work that I've seen. Okay.
Bill, I have a question. In your in the website that ARAP has and that other researchers have done, especially yours, because I think you've done a tremendous job when you went up there and found 140 people who saw something. You basically went out there and measured where they were and measured what they saw, and your information, which I find really fascinating and very illuminating, indicates there were two missiles.
There's a possibility.
That triangulation shows one closer to shore and then one possibly at this 30-knot object. Could you maybe clarify that for everybody?
The last series of trips that we took up to Long Island and to Massachusetts and to New Jersey identifies a large number, and to keep it simple, we didn't put a whole bunch of pins on here, but since the congressional report that we sent in that you're mostly referring to back in July of last year, we picked up, there were two scallopers here, there was one up here, we have Al Geip out here. So the vast, in that report we sent to Congress, we show that eyewitnesses are referencing a possibility of two missiles, one from inshore, somewhere in here, and this location out here to the southeast. I'm concentrating now on that one because that's the one that I think we could walk in front of a jury and prove. We've got people in airliners overhead now that are giving us a description of a missile going in that direction, intercepting the aircraft, and again, a whole 270-degree loop of witnesses. Al Geip down here, for instance, gave me, it's uncanny. I mean, the hair stood up on the back of my neck when he answered this question. He runs his own engineering firm. We've had him in front of the media before. I said, Al, how long did you see the streak? You know, it came from the horizon. He said 4 to 6 seconds, okay? Give me your best estimate as what the angle was going up. He told me between 30 and 45 degrees. The firing solution from the right there, now he's back over here in a sailboat almost at sea level. He can't see a boat here because it's too far away. But he sees a streak go up from south to north, which is in that direction, for 4 to 6 seconds. And it's right in the middle of the actual firing solution when you do the mathematics. Okay, so I bring Al Geip in and some of these other witnesses in front of a finder of fact, and I'm confident that any rational human is going to come to the conclusion that that airplane was shot down based on witness testimony. The other witnesses in here, you know, I don't have the preponderance that I do on this one particular shot. That's the basic.
I have a follow-up question. You correlated the geographic locations of the witnesses. You correlated where they were all pointing when they say they saw the light.
Right.
How did you correlate the time at which they made these observations?
Well, the time basically is, because it was such a short time, the only thing you can do is rely on human recollection on timing. I mean, all of them, as Ed has said, basically, he went through the head nods and everything else up here. So he saw something going up, he turned away from it, he thought it was a flare, turned back, and what he described, I believe, is the two main pillars of fire that were on the way down in the opposite direction, which was the crashing aircraft. To answer your question, I don't know, I'm not sure what you're getting at, other than maybe there were other...
How did you correlate what time of day all these witnesses claimed to have seen the event?
Oh, because they tell you. They were there at just at sundown. They were...
I mean,
yeah.
in turn, you know, just at sundown could be 8:29, it could be 8:29 and 30 seconds, it could be 8:30.
Right. Yeah, the event was, you couldn't miss the event if you were looking out to sea because of the huge size of the fireball.
But isn't time a critical part of the mathematics of plotting a firing solution?
No, well, in the way you're saying is, if there was somebody out there playing with fireworks that would confuse the matter, maybe that's what you're getting at. But
well, if he saw something at 8:29 and 30 seconds and someone else saw it at 8:30,
right. Oh, I'm so.
Is that the same object?
Yeah. Yeah, it's the only way you can really, and then it's not scientific. I mean, absolutely scientific. It's going to be relative to the major event, which is the huge fireball that they saw. Almost all of these people were impressed with the fireball.
So there's no scientific way of establishing what the witnesses saw and when.
Right. Yes. That's true.
That's the point.
Yeah. In fact, the average person. I mean, I know my watch runs 2 minutes fast. You know, it keeps me in gear. So even even somebody that looked at a clock is not going to give you an absolute compared to the precision timing that you would get off the radar, for instance. So.
Let's hear from Gallagher.
Yes. Okay. Thanks, Ed. How about giving him a hand? It takes, it takes a little bit of gumption to stand up and do this. Okay. Bill Gallagher. Captain Bill.
Yeah. My name is William Gallagher. I'm a commercial fisherman from New Jersey, and I was located approximately anywhere from 10 to 12 miles. I haven't figured out the exact position, 10 to 13 miles west of the aircraft. And I saw something very similar to what, the majority of witnesses have testified to. I saw a flare, what I thought was a flare. Then I saw a large white ball, and from that white ball were two orange bands that, after I saw Chuck Scarborough on the TV say it was Flight 800, I knew was the fuel igniting. But my initial thought process was flare, fireworks, post 4th of July, and then I couldn't determine what it was. I'm not going to even begin to speculate on what I think that it is, because that's not important. What I do feel is important is the truth. And there's some things that, I'm about 6 credits short of my physics degree, so I didn't quite understand everything that you said today. But, some things that I've learned today are just very troubling to me as a citizen. And one is that the plane increased in speed, which he's saying means it's nosediving down towards the water. The other thing that really caught my attention was the fact that he says he has 2 pieces of debris being shot out of the airplane at Mach 2. And from what Bill says, that you can actually stand ankle deep in this tank and hold the match above the fuel, and it won't light until you get above 14,000 feet. To me, it adds up to, I think, a more serious look by the media, into something that has been controversial for 3 years. I mean, you know, these people wouldn't be wasting their time if they were barking up an empty tree. You know, they keep prodding forward, and they keep finding something that has substance and merit to it. And I think that they deserve for, you know, a little bit of muscle from the media to take over a little bit of what they're doing, to ask the hard questions, to ask for data to be released. You know, I don't think the truth is an awful thing. I never have my entire life. You know, and when it's sacrificed for, you know, for egos, you know, I don't know, is this a matter of national insecurity? You know, I would just like to see the truth. I cannot, I'm sorry.
Let me get you, I appreciate it. I appreciate the pat on the back, but what these guys are going to really want is give them a blow by blow, what you were doing on the boat and where you were standing, the direction the boat was going, that kind of stuff, and what the flare did. I mean, that's what impressed me.
Okay.
You haven't told that for us.
Okay. What I saw, I had just disengaged with a conversation from the Coast Guard. They had come up to my vessel with a 41-footer or a 44-footer and just asked me some basic questions that they normally do. You know, what's your port, home port? When did you leave? When are you returning? What species are you fishing for? And I answered those questions, and I was proceeding east to make one last tow before I did go home. I just got done talking to my coworker out on deck, and I was walking up the side of my fishing vessel looking to the east towards where the aircraft blew up. And what I saw was initially, again, a flare that was ascending, that was coming from the offshore side. I'm not going to speculate on whether it was coming from southeast or south, east, southeast. I'm not going to tie myself to that. It was coming from offshore, heading inshore, okay? And then at the very end, it just kind of pigtailed up. It just made a little bit of a turn up, and then there was a huge white ball, which, again, I thought was fireworks. That was my immediate thought process. From that white ball, 2 orange bands of obviously the fuel burning came off of that white ball. And when I was interviewed by the FBI, I did tell the individual of what I thought the debris fields might look like in reference to what I saw and how the plane exploded, and that a smaller debris field might be found further west and offshore, because the piece that fell south actually went in an arc off of the white explosion. And the orange band that fell inshore immediately went off at a perpendicular angle from the white ball explosion. So I assumed that was a heavier piece, or more a larger piece, and that the larger debris field would be found further east and inshore. And that was the account that I gave the FBI agent that came to my house to interview me.
And I'll add, it was, again, another one of these investigative moments when the hair stands up on the back of your neck. When I went eyeball, well, we were phone to phone, I guess, on the first interview, and he described this. He described the debris field. And so he's an excellent witness. The facts match what he saw on the surface or on the bottom of the ocean. Okay. Questions for, I guess, unless you got something you want to add?
No. You know, the only thing I would like to say is that I've never been able to get, you know, my heart and my emotions away from the gentleman. I don't know where he lives, but he lost his wife and 2 of the most beautiful little blonde-haired girls. And I think the only thing that he had precious to cling to was that, you know, that they died immediately. And for that man to sit through whatever it was, 49 or 52 seconds, and have to, you know, draw a totally different conclusion of what was already a painful recollection for him, and have to envision what his wife and children went through because of this, you know, from this video that was shown in Baltimore, is one of the cruelest things that I think I've ever seen, because I don't think that it was true. And to hear this gentleman here say today that the plane accelerated in speed and that if it were to accelerate up to 15 or 17,000 feet, that it would have a decrease in speed. So if you have, I mean, the radar isn't going to lie. The radar doesn't have an ego. It doesn't have a, you know, a stake in the game. It's not going to get a promotion. It's not going to get a demotion. I mean, it's just concrete fact, you know, and here it is, you know, accelerating in speed. Yes, sir?
Did you, like to address this to you and Mr. Wagner, were either of you re-interviewed by the FBI?
I was never re-interviewed by the FBI. I did drag up a piece of what I believed was the aircraft, and I notified them, and it was between 3 and 5 days later that they actually came and picked it up.
Did you, what was your impression of the FBI when they interviewed you? Did they seem like they were really interested in finding out what you had seen?
Can you tell him to talk into the microphone?
I heard your question. Could you please restate it in the microphone?
Yeah, I'd just like to know what on the table. Oh, sorry. What was your impression of the FBI when they interviewed you? Did they seem like they were very interested in getting your account and getting all the details of it? How closely did they question you about what you had seen?
It was a detailed questioning. It certainly wasn't like a nonchalant effort. If you know, I'm not saying that you're trying to assume anything, but I mean, he came to my house and wanted to know every scrap of information that I had and all my recollections. What I did find slightly troubling was that I do have a very accurate, from what Mr. Donaldson says in the debris field, I had a very accurate account from the get-go. What I initially saw and how I explained it is a pretty good record. And then to hear later on that people were re-interviewed by the FBI for the purpose of whatever press conference it was mentioned at, and I wasn't one of those. I was wondering just, you know, either who was more credible or who had a better vantage point. So I just had an issue of, you know, questioning who got interviewed second and what was the criteria for it.
Did you write down? Did you make a written account of what you saw immediately after you observed it, or within a day of having seen it?
Not within a day, but I do have, I think, a 3-page written account of what I saw.
When did you write it?
Shortly thereafter. I don't have a specific date. Yes, sir.
You mentioned that the first explosive event you saw was the first explosive event you mentioned you saw was a blast of white light. Was there any subsequent explosions after that?
No, right after the white, just picture a bright white light bulb, and from that light bulb came the 2 arches, you know, just say McDonald's arches, you know, but one went a lot higher than the other, and the other one just came off the side. But one did actually arch off, which I interpreted as lighter because of the explosion was able to make it gain some sort of altitude, because I did see it arch up, that it was a smaller piece of the aircraft. Thank you very much.
I have a question for Mr. Stalka.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, we'll go right into Q&A here.
A couple of questions. You said Whiskey 105 was activated the day of the crash.
Yes, that's correct.
When was it activated?
I don't want to be inaccurate up here, and I don't have the data in front of me. 8 p.m. Excuse me? 8 p.m.
41 minutes before the plane went down.
All right, that was James Sanders informed me that it's 8 p.m. He must have the data in front of him.
Okay. Now, Mr. Sanders, what data do you have that shows that?
Mr. Sanders?
What data do you have that shows that it was activated at 8 p.m.?
We have the FAA and, give me a second to dredge this up. We have FAA data, and we also have military documents that they're talking back and forth to each other. This part's really old news. It's not controversial.
Is this the box that we're talking about?
No,
the offshore box?
No, at 8 p.m., in fact, it was the night before when down at Virginia, Dam Neck, called FACS-VAC or VAX-FAC. There you go. They notified the FAA in Ronkonkoma very close to where the plane went down, that in fact Whiskey 105 was going to be hot that night starting at 8 p.m. That data was first gathered by Dave Hendricks of Riverside Press Enterprise, and that was the first major story that contradicted what the official investigation was talking about, and that came out in October of 1996.
And that's different from the box that you talk about in your book.
Oh, no, the box. I'm not sure what word.
Well, in your book, you talk about a geographic area in the shape of a rectangular box offshore.
Oh, no, well, Whiskey 105 was one of multiple areas.
That's different than Whiskey 105. That's a special operating area much further south.
And let me say one other thing. When Dave Hendricks got those, being the good reporter that he is, he called up both the FBI and the United States Navy asking for comments, and they said they wouldn't comment. So I said, well, I'm going to the FBI specifically said, I'm going to fax this over to you because I want to comment. And Kallstrom's right-hand man, whose name escapes me right now, told him that, in fact, if he faxed it, it would go immediately into the trash can. They weren't going to look at it. They weren't going to comment on it. So.
Now, Mr. Stalcup, you were, in referencing the 30-knot target and the other ships, you said it passed ahead of one ship in this mass of ships and behind another ship, and then you said it could have rendezvoused with these ships. Is there anything on the radar data to indicate that it did rendezvous?
No, and the reason for that is because the radar data that I had ended in about 15 or 16 minutes after the crash. And so all the radar that we have ends with the third knot track becoming close to these vessels. And the radar data,
within about a mile, I think you said.
Within a mile of one and within a half mile of two others.
And did their speed change or did their direction change?
No, for some reason the NTSB did not send me data after that time period, which
But
would have,
well, I mean, but in the data you've got, is there any change in speed or direction?
Data I got, no.
Okay.
The data I got has a constant speed for all the ships. Like I said before, speed of the ships didn't change, increase, slow down.
There's a technical point here too. First of all, when these tracks that you're looking at are not, you may imagine that you're getting a hit every time that radar sweeps. It sweeps every 4.7 seconds. That's not true. I've spent a lot of time looking at that 30-knot track. In the aggregate, about every fourth sweep is actually recorded on the video. So you've got to be very, very careful with raw radar data. That ship or boat could have actually, if it was a small boat, could have actually stopped dead in the water and accelerated from that stop after firing, for instance, in a hypothetical, back up to 35 knots. And if it was in the gap where there were 4, 5, 6 misses on hits, it would never even be recorded that it stopped. Okay, so the quality of the data, we're not looking at an air target that is essentially hit and returned on raw radar on every sweep. This is a surface target. The only way that, I agree with the FBI on this one, I think it was a small boat. The only way that could have been recorded at that distance is because they had ducting that evening. And that's a phenomenon that occurs when the temperature is warmer, higher, instead of colder. The radar waves will actually follow the curvature of the Earth out to a certain distance, depending on the phenomenon. On the far stall, when I ran the air traffic control center on there, I saw ducting one night that went out to 200 miles. We actually could see mountaintops 200 miles away. So I don't want, Tom here, neither one of us want a false impression that every hit is absolutely, I mean, every movement and everything, every object hit out there was recorded. It's not. But the data is the data, and it does show the aggregate track.
But, and so what you're saying is that there's nothing that you have in your data to conclusively determine whether that 30-knot target stopped at any point,
no,
or whether it rendezvoused with any other ship.
No, and you can't determine it because...
Let me answer that.
Oh, go ahead.
The data we have does not show any slowdown at all. It's my conclusion that the third knot track did not stop or slow down. There are some hits directly after the tragedy where it's close, where you can see the third knot track there, if I can get my pointer. This is a picture of the aircraft at the time of the accident when it exploded. Here's the third knot track. And it's, of course, still right now because the animation isn't moving. But there are a couple radar hits. Actually, there's a bunch of radar hits that show it continually moving. So it's my conclusion, based on the radar data, that the third knot track was on a third knot track heading. Course speed didn't change. Actually, the course did change a little bit. It kind of curved as it went in here, it kind of curved back. But 3rd knots the whole way.
Now, it's my understanding from what you're saying is that that is the only surface target that has not been identified.
According to the FBI, well, actually, that's more a question for Commander Donaldson. He sent a letter to Louis Chiarello, who answered that question to through Trafficant, right?
We sent Mr. Trafficant sent a letter of questions that we wrote, and one of them was specifically because I already had inside information from one of the FBI agents that they had not identified all the surface contacts. So when they came back, it took them 120 days to answer the Congress, which I think is, my personal opinion is, that's not a way to run a railroad.
Do you have any idea how many of those targets were identified?
No. And well, the way the answer was written, it was written in a way that we did identify all the surface contacts except for one boat 2.9 nautical miles to the southeast of Flight 800 when it exploded. We don't think it was a military vessel. We think it was a boat 25 to 35 feet long. Now, there's an interesting segue here because one of our witnesses was standing on Mauritius Inlet fishing. We've got 4 witnesses that were there. This guy was an aircraft constructionman. He saw a cigarette boat come out of the inlet, a dark-hulled cigarette boat, hesitate for about 2 minutes in the opening, and then race off at extremely high speed directly to the southeast. 20 minutes later, that's exactly the point on the horizon that he saw the flare go up. Now, I'm jumping through, this isn't scientific, but it is anecdotal.
All right, well, let's stick with the targets, though,
sure.
for a minute. Because you said one of the things notable about that 30-knot target is that it passed directly under 800's flight path, was within 3 miles at the time of the explosion, but didn't turn and didn't go to the aid of the scene. Nor did any of the other targets, some of whom we can assume have been identified.
I would, yeah, if the FBI is telling us the truth.
And now nor did Mr. Wagner feel compelled to go out to the aid on the scene because he was not sure what it was. So based on what the data you're putting up here, there doesn't seem to be anything unusual in the fact that that boat didn't turn and go to the aid of 800.
Wagner didn't have a radio. Most of the boats out there.
No, but he had eyeballs, and he said he and his friend decided not to investigate.
Yeah, but he didn't have a radio. You can speculate that the boats with the radios heard what happened.
And do we know whether the 30-knot target had a radio or not?
No, of course not.
Okay.
No, but we do know that none of these targets responded, but the citizen mariners that had radios heard what was going on because through the reports through the Coast Guard.
And can we assume that some of the other targets in the area had radios?
That's a very valid assumption. Yes.
Okay, and none of them turned?
None of them turned.
I've got 2 questions for Commander Donaldson. You said earlier that the damage to the upper surface of the left wing can't be explained by any accident scenario.
That's correct.
How many accidents involving aircraft the size of a 747 have you investigated?
Well, you know I haven't, because I've investigated tactical Navy crashes.
So what do you base that statement on?
Well, the statement's based on the fact that anybody that's gone through the basic metal training and understands the principles of hydraulics and so forth. Let me jump to what the FBI told me when I had this conversation with a F-14 pilot was then on the missile team for the FBI. I said, after reading the report from China Lake, I'm going to say his name, Steve Bongard. It's out. He's in the book. He's the guy I was talking to. I said, Steve, how do you explain what happened to the left wing on the aircraft? And he said, well, the NTSB is telling us that the wing came off, flipped around, and pancaked on the surface of the surface, and that caused that weird damage. I said, Steve, when you rip apart the number 2 main, you pull it off the airplane, the fuel dumps out. How do you get hydraulic damage 2 miles later after that wing falls through the air and hits the water? It can't happen. Well, the thing is, Mr. McKenna, let me point something out here. All 3 tanks had the same phenomena, and what you would have to do is you would have to separate that wing with the common wall between the center wing tank attached to the wing tank, keeping those three tanks a hydraulically intact compartment. If that actually happened, it would be feasible to have a peculiar sort of hydraulic damage all the way through there. But the other problem is it was only the upper skin. That leads me to believe the upper skin is what's under a load in flight. And people I didn't want to get technical, but the entire weight of the aircraft.
Well, don't get technical, but your statement that the damage can't be explained by any accident scenario,
right,
from what you're saying, is based entirely on theory, not on any practical examination of damage to aircraft, commercial airline aircraft that have plunged into the water.
Listen, it's common for the skin to rupture on the end of these wing tips. If a wing comes off, for instance, it folds up, the centrifugal force will cause that kind of hydraulic rupture, only on the wing tip or on the swinging part of the wing. And it would happen on both sides of the wing.
But that's all. That's not practical experience. That's theory of aircraft
it's practical
dynamics.
Experience. I've read almost everything the NTSB's put out for 25 years. Now, I mean, I'll stand here for a lot of things, but you find somebody in the NTSB with my credentials, okay? You find somebody that'll debate me on any medium you want to debate me on, and I'll go nose to nose with them, credentials or not. I want the NTSB to explain that phenomenon. The military has suggested how to solve the problem.
I've got one last question. Mr. Donaldson has argued since almost Mr. Sanders has argued almost from day one that 800 was shot down by the U.S. Navy or other U.S. military forces. Your Navy, Admiral Moore's Navy, Captain Hill's Navy, is that what you're saying, that this plane was shot down?
Personally. Here's what I'll say, though, and I'm not going to speak for the Admiral. Here's what I'll say. If the United States Navy was involved in this and had anything to do with covering up an actual engagement of a civilian airliner, I'll be the first one in line demanding a court-martial. This is about aviation flight safety. One thing I didn't say was airliners, not this big, but other airliners, 727, 26 of them have been shot down around the world in the 20 years leading up to this event. The military was the only people that had the guts to put it on paper. Nobody in the NTSB or the FBI has ever addressed the subject. You want to fly to Africa and get shot down? I don't. Are they addressing it? No. Why? Because they're covering up what happened to this airplane.
Can I give a follow-up
I've got
on
a
that,
question,
Commander Donaldson? The headline on this thing says 30 surface vessels ignore a tragedy. And while you're saying, no, I won't say the Navy shot it down, I mean, the implication here is that these 30 ships were military and that they were in close communication. Is that not true?
I am not making that implication. I will not. You cannot take raw radar data and make an assumption until you have witnesses or some other collaborating evidence.
Well, Bill, what do you think? What do you think all those ships were doing out in 105?
I don't.
Yeah.
I'd like to address that point. The reason we stated 30 surface vessels ignore tragedy is because that's what happened. FERO, Flight 100 Independent Researchers Organization, does not speculate or does not try to speculate. We try to avoid speculation at all costs. We want to ask you that question. Can you please go find out what these vessels were? You have a lot more resources than we do. I'm really busy down in Tallahassee working at a laboratory. I kind of feel upset that, I'm the one doing this. I kind of think it's not my responsibility. I think it's my duty as an American when I'm finding this information to let people know about it.
Let me follow up, Tom.
Yeah.
You say you don't want to speculate what they were doing.
Yeah.
I'll ask Bill the same thing. Why did the NTSB, the FAA, all these people keep the fact that there were all of these vessels out there? Why have they kept that secret for 3 years? Why are they angry now that it's gotten out?
I think
if they were innocent, if they were commercial vessels, why don't they say so? There's implications left that these have all been identified.
Right.
Their existence has not even been made known up until today.
Right, and not only their existence, but their courses were parallel. And some of them were following bow to stern courses. I mean, They were on directly over one another, behind each other by sometimes 3 miles. How can boats have that capability? And at the same time, an aircraft is flying directly over a path of about 3 different boats. Comes around 3 different times and back and forth.
Now,
that's the radar data. We hope that you guys can find out what it was.
Now,
or
wait a
ask
second.
the NTSB. The NTSB should answer these questions.
Now, you're saying that it wasn't that you just said that this data was not revealed until today.
Yes.
But you got this data from the NTSB.
Yes.
And I assume you got it through official channels.
Yes.
Okay. And the NTSB claims this has been in the public record since April 1998.
Yeah, they say this is old news.
So how do you explain the claim that this is first being revealed today if it's been
Have you ever seen
availably
it before?
public?
Have you ever seen it? That's just a question to you. Do you have,
You're claiming that the NTSB withheld
No, Graham, let me
You're claiming that the
Hold on,
NTSB withheld
I
this.
can. What was that?
You're claiming that the NTSB withheld this until today, kept this secret from the public until today.
Let me. Okay.
Yet
They told Graham they lost it. Okay.
Yet you got it from the NTSB.
I got it from the NTSB. Now.
And when did you get it?
We got it in June.
So that would seem to say that it was publicly available in June.
Right.
Listen,
publicly available. Now, it took me about a week staying up day and night to analyzing this data isn't easy. If you have an American citizen who's an average Joe, goes to the NTSB, can I please have the raw data? They're going to get a bunch of numbers with labeled really poorly. It took me a while to figure out even what the labels meant. Oh, look at all these numbers. That's not availability. Availability is a plot like this, is an animation showing where the ships were. If you have a bunch of numbers and I show them to you and have a press conference, you guys would say, so what? But when I have the animation, this is what the NTSB should have done. They should have put it in a form where the American public could understand. That's what was kept from the American public.
Is there any contemporaneous record of radio traffic coming from these 30 vessels that would document what the state of mind was in the discussion among and between the various people on these vessels? And if they're military vessels, they're obviously in communication with commanders. If they're in a military exercise, there must be some record of radio communication, eyewitness accounts from these vessels of what they saw or didn't see. And is there any record of this? Have you reviewed any of this? What does it say?
Can you repeat the question? I was.
Well, you say there were 30 vessels out there on the water.
Oh, the
now,
radio
presumably,
communication.
if any of them are military vessels, they are communicating
right.
But among themselves and with commanders that are involved in this military exercise. Have you reviewed any of the radio traffic or records of it to see what, if anything, was said about this incident that we're all here to discuss, this tragedy with the TWA airliner?
Let me answer this question. I don't have any radio data. I have radar data.
Here's the guy that was out there with a radio.
Oh, you have a radio? Okay,
yeah.
he has it.
I think something that has been overlooked is that there's a window of time post-crash that nobody knows anything, and I think that's when the upper levels of government are being briefed that something tragic happened, and I think that's why everybody probably, jumped to the terrorist conclusion with the Olympics going on and everything else. So the plane blew up at, I don't know what 8:17, 8:16?
8:31.
Okay, the plane blows up at 8:31. Chuck Scarborough doesn't come on my TV on the boat. He doesn't come on at 8:32 and tell me the plane's gone down. He's coming on at 8:45. I mean, I don't know what the window of time is, but I would say it's 10, 15 minutes of probably some pretty quick phone calls going from all the heavyweights going on because we have a civilian airline just shot down within our waters. So, it's not going to be news on our TVs, as citizens until all those phone calls are made. So there's probably a 10 or 15 minute window of time before anybody knows it. So for 8:31, if it's 15 minutes, all the ships that you see don't even know that it's blown up yet.
How do we know that, though?
All I'm saying is you would need to find out when it was officially reported by the media in reference to this radar data. If the media gets it at 8:50, none of these ships are going to know whether they're military or civilian. I can tell you that I had Channel 16 on because I just got done talking to the Coast Guard. Okay? And I can tell you that right after I saw the explosion, I went into my wheelhouse and I listened to several minutes of, I felt bad for the Coast Guard guy that was on the receiving end of it all, but it was bonkers for him. Oh, I saw a flare. It was Bayside. No, it was Oceanside. There was a lot of discrepancy on where the flare originated from.
Well, the question I have is, do any of you have any knowledge or understanding of what the radio traffic was? For example, were these ships ordered, if they were military vessels, were they ordered to stay their course because somebody else was taking care of the incident that we're all here to discuss? Do you have any knowledge of what they were ordered or not ordered to do or not do?
Your question is leaping in logic a little bit. What Tom has presented is raw video from analyzed as to what was there captured on a videotape.
Yeah, it's really hard to get anything from the military.
So your answer is that you do not have any knowledge of what the radio traffic was? No, I'm asking you if you
No,
yes, I am, with the Washington Times.
Why don't you have some of that information?
Well,
Because I'm just finding out today about these vessels.
Look, we have two very experienced naval officers here, Admiral Moore and Admiral Hill. What are the chances of somebody asking for the communications between, if those were Navy ships, of getting the communications between those ships? Can anybody tune in and find out what ship X is saying to ship Y in the Navy?
Well, you'd have to know what those ships were to begin with until you find out. One of the things I want to make clear here, and why I got in this in the first place, is, in a sense, knowing what happens when you have an accident or an incident in any military unit. If it's large enough, it's impossible to keep it quiet. There's no way to keep it covered up, because most of the questions initially about this was before people realized it was a surface-to-air missile and they thought it might be an air-to-air missile. Did we have a sidewinder go off by mistake from one of our airplanes? Did something like that occur? And the answer to that is that's impossible to cover up. Now, on the other hand, if you had something that was controlled by a combination of the CIA or other intelligence organizations that was in conjunction with military ships for just this specific incident, that's something else again. And that's what the press ought to be looking into. In other words, was there an initial indication that we had something like this going to happen? And there is some evidence to indicate that there was some indication. We've heard enough about this and the way it's been programmed. So it's possible that one or two of these vessels or ships, I like to say ships, there's no such thing as a vessel. That's what holds water. There is a possibility that if there was some advance information, your combination of the FBI, CIA, and others could have had units there for that purpose. That's all I'm saying. That's anyone can come to that conclusion. I'm just saying there was no accidental firing of anything from a military unit under any circumstances that could be covered up. That's what I say.
Could I ask Mr. Stelka something? Mr. Stelka, do you have any expert advice that the raw data that you've displayed there really are ships, and if so, that they really are of some size?
Yes, we have independent confirmation from radar experts and other physicists from around the country that have looked at the same data and confirmed that they were ships.
Can you name one of them?
No, I cannot. I can name a university, University of Maryland, but I will not name the radar expert. Does not wish to be named. But his reaction, I can tell you his reaction was, yeah, those are targets. Damned if I know what they were.
Isn't it true that from the raw data it's impossible to tell the size of the...
Yeah, plus or I could say 50 feet plus or minus 100 feet. So yeah, it's because you got ducting, it's almost impossible to say the size. The height, yeah.
Let me read it. Okay. There's a formula you can use if you have normal atmospherics based on the curvature of the Earth that will give you the basic height above the Earth. There's no way to tell how wide the target, long the target is on the surface. Unfortunately, that night, and I've come to believe this, there was ducting. And ducting screws up that formula. The first time I looked at this and applied the proper formulas, I thought we had a boat with at least a 60-foot above the surface mast height in order to get a return back to the 131-foot mast height at Islip's ASR-8 radar. The problem is the theory, you got to throw it out the window because the temperatures were all screwed up, and that means the radar beams did probably what the FBI told us in the official answer, and so on. But we don't know. That you can't tell how you don't know whether it's an aircraft carrier or a sailboat with a radar reflector when you get the hit on raw data.
Let me just add to that. The fact that we didn't see the attic, which is a WPB Coast Guard cutter, suggests that these ships may have been larger than the attic, which is ADAC.
The ADAC. She was
According to the ship's captain, she was down there, right? According to the NTSB, she was 5.4 nautical miles north-northeast.
Well, according...
There's some conflict with regard to, yeah.
There are two different locations according to the NTSB,
yeah.
Which I think is interesting.
But anyway, at either location, I did not see that vessel heading towards the crash. So one could conclude or hypothesize that these ships were indeed bigger than the ADAC. But, of course, that's...
I don't want you to name your source, but when you got this from the NTSB, this matter of contention here, did you say to that person, did you tell that person what you have concluded here?
I didn't have the data. I didn't have the... what do you mean?
Did you ask anybody at NTSB, what does this all mean? Have you gotten any reaction out of NTSB?
You want to hear the history with me and the NTSB?
Well, I heard some of it here,
okay,
and I know what you're going through, but...
Yeah, I can tell you a little bit. I mean, I contacted the NTSB radar analyst, which I won't mention his name, and he was going to get me the data. He said, just call this office. I called the office. He sent me the wrong disc. The next time I called him, he was told by his authorities he could no longer speak with me. So I said, oh, great. So then about 2 or 3 months later, I said, hey, Graham, you're not me, so you give him a call and just see if he'll give you the data that he was going to give me.
And he referred me to, and at that point he referred me to the information office, and in the information office, because he said the information office has had it all this time. And so I went to the information office and sent them faxes, sent them emails, and that was the story of like months and months and months, and finally they said, we've lost it. And then we went through official channels again and said, well, find it, because this is public stuff. And they went back down there through their process. So it was the information office that actually anyone can now get this data from, but it wasn't always so.
And also to note, the FAA was given direct orders, a member of the FAA who's in charge of the Freedom of Information Act requests at JFK Airport named Fred Valerio told me on the phone that the NTSB gave the FAA direct orders not to release any radar data regarding this tragedy.
And is that unusual?
They said it was publicly available.
No,
I'm just telling you what happened.
You're making the assertion that the NTSB ordered that this data not be released.
I'm not making the assertion. I'm quoting someone that told me.
But in fact, it's routine procedure in an accident investigation that the only agency that can release data about the incident is the NTSB. You go request radar data on JFK Jr.'s plane, the FAA is going to tell you, go to the NTSB. Right. That's the way things work.
And then the next time I called the NTSB, which was around that time, they said they were no longer even allowed to talk to me. Never mind, give me the radar.
Well, didn't you say that the FAA said that the NTSB didn't want the data released?
Yes. I mean, maybe it's normal procedure, but I'm a physics student. I'm not normally doing this kind of stuff. To me, it sounded funny, but maybe it's normal procedure.
They said it was publicly available.
They said it, yeah, but like he said, it could be just protocol that NTSB releases the data. So yeah, that's a good point.
These other ships, officially the government is saying they don't know the identity of only one, correct?
No.
Oh, well, let me make that point. The FBI responded to.
Let's get exact.
Well, let me try to finish first.
What are they identifying publicly about these ships?
They said they identified 371 surface vessels, except, excuse me, Commander. Oh, it's gone now. Okay, except the one that was closest to the crash. They didn't say they didn't tell the location of the vessels they identified. They never showed a map and said, I knew this one, I know this one, I know. They didn't do anything like that. They gave us a number.
Yeah, have they publicly identified those 307?
No, not publicly. The FBI, like everything else.
That's being withheld as well.
Yeah, the FBI conveniently suspended their investigation rather than close it. Therefore, they can withhold all details of the investigation, including the identity of these ships.
And the Navy said that the nearest vessel was the Normandy, which was
The nearest naval vessel,
surface vessel.
well, the nearest not a submarine vessel
Yeah, surface.
was 180 miles away. That's according to the Navy.
Now, I want to ask anybody here that can answer this, including Admiral Moore and Admiral Hill, what do you think all those ships were doing in a zone that was declared off limits to commercial traffic at 8 o'clock that night? They're not, it's not in a sea lane. What do you think they were? And, you know, why did they declare the zone off limits? That means they're going to do something there, right?
Well, I don't know how they got the information. That's another thing. I have been involved in incidents, for example, when I had command of ships that got into firing areas and never gotten the information. And there are thousands of ships on the water and off the coast all the time.
Yeah,
So I can't answer that question.
Yeah, but here we've got 20. I don't know, you redrew the boundary.
I'd say it's more like 40.
Well, there were about, according to your original chart, I counted 20 inside the boundary. Now you
Inside the boundary. Yeah, 20 inside the boundary. Fine.
now
There were more heading towards it.
You got 20 ships, and 2 of them are doing over 30 or over 30 knots or more, 30 and 34.
Of the size either, and Commander Donaldson.
Well, these were how far out?
They go out to around 30 miles.
Right operations orders that made the warning areas hot. These very same warning, not this one, but ones further down the coast. What the Admiral implied is exactly true. We have to abort F-14 air-to-air firings off of Virginia Beach all the time because there are fishermen out there underneath the 20-millimeter ballistic fall of the weaponry. It happens every day. This particular warning area is not that active. And I want to make another statement here. An intentional firing of a full-size live naval weapon as close to the sea lane and the air lanes and the Long Island population is a court-martial offense, in my belief, to begin with.
But Bill, so, why did the Navy tell Dave Hendricks when he asked them about the NOTAM, why did they deny that it existed?
Well,
why did they refuse to comment when he proved to them that it existed? Aren't they behaving rather strangely if they've got nothing to hide?
Let me answer this delicately. The media gets most of their information in Washington from the Congressional Liaison Office people who are probably in those jobs because they didn't want them out at sea doing the operational jobs, okay? So they make mistakes. The direct link to a command at sea is not there every day. So they give standard answers, and then they come back and they clean up their act after the fact. I mean,
3 years later, they still haven't cleaned it up.
Well, this is the first time the data has been put up on the board.
Commander, can I ask you one more here? You have in your piece number 3 on page 2 of the one you've headed TWA Flight 800 investigation after 3 years, no answers.
Okay.
Immediately after the shoot-down, hundreds of miles away, sailors aboard ship reported the captain of the aircraft carrier USS John F. Kennedy told his crew the airliner was downed by shoulder-fired missiles, inferring the ship may be called to action. How could he have known these facts if it wasn't from chain of command? One, how do you know that? And 2, did the FBI or NTSB question the captain of the Kennedy?
I doubt that very much because this was a call that came into us from a sailor that was on board. We verified where the ship was. It fit the data that he gave us. Very sincere young man. He is positive that the captain used those words. Now, the reason I put that in that report is that the President of the United States made similar phone calls and made similar statements at similar times.
He talked to the people in Atlanta at the Olympics.
Right. I've got people that'll step up in front, I hope, of a fact-finding operation and explain that they got a call from the White House where the president told, I've got the names of the agents, told the agents that this aircraft had been engaged and shot down by shoulder-fired missiles, and the implication was that Atlanta was next. The other background data that I've got is that the London Times back in August, 5 weeks after the event, published a series in which they alleged 3 Stinger missiles had come in from Karachi through Rotterdam and into Halifax across the Canadian border 5 months before the event. The London Times reporter got a quote from the anti-terrorist staffer in the White House that they were aware of those intelligence reports, and if the airplane has been shot down by Stingers, we'll have to look and see if they were from Afghanistan. That's a chilling thing to have the London press come up with 5 weeks after the fact, and yet the president's spokesman at the same time that they're dredging for Stinger first stages out there and paying $5.5 million to do it, Mike McCurry gets up in front of the world and says, anybody in this government that thinks a missile brought the airplane down has half a brain. Does that mean Mr. Hall, who was paying for recovering the parts at the time?
What if the NTSB comes back and says, okay, yeah, there was a bureaucratic snafu, we should have gotten this radar data out earlier, but the fact is, from all indications, all of these boats are fishing boats, or freighters, or whatever. You know, what then? Will that satisfy you?
Only if they all had very sophisticated equipment to stay on exact courses. I'm not a fisherman. Bill Gallagher, the fishing boats normally travel like the boats you saw today.
There's no commercial fishing boat that would be fishing in those areas. They would be predominantly scallopers on those grounds.
And how fast do scallopers normally travel?
If they can do 10 knots, 11 knots tops. But
Okay,
I would like to clarify one point, and that is I don't want the fact that these boats aren't reacting to the explosion of the aircraft. I don't think that's fair to read into that too much, because I think what has to be established first is when it was made public to the American public through whatever media channels, whether it was over the wire, over the TV, but there's definitely, I'm not going to speculate what it was, a 10 or 15 minute, could be 18 minutes between the time that the aircraft blew up and the time that it was put out in major media form for us and the world to know. And it's very possible that, you know, when I saw it from Chuck Scarborough, that's within a 1 or 2 minute time where everybody was getting that information. That information might be at 8:48, which is 1 minute after your radar data. So I don't want everybody thinking that everybody knew the plane was down and everybody said, oh, so what? It's not my family. I don't, you know what I mean? The reason why they didn't react, because they didn't know. And I can tell you what my thought process was. I had a flare, I had a fireworks, and then what the heck was that? You know, it wasn't, I heard channel 16 traffic of flares. It was Bayside, it was Oceanside. It wasn't until it came on the major networks on TV that anybody realized that a major aircraft had gone down. So that's the time that needs to be established with reference to these boats not reacting. And I think that's an important point. I don't want people leaving this meeting saying that, you know, there's 60 boats on radar not reacting to this plane going down. It has to be the Navy. I don't want that conclusion to be drawn, because it has to be established when the public was made aware that the plane went down. In reference to, but it does raise the question, and I would ask that the reporters follow this up, that how about let's see in the radar data post 8:47.
Yeah, I'd like to make a request about that. If some reporters can ask the NTSB for all the radar data from 2 hours before to 2 hours after, maybe even 5 hours before, the whole day, I will volunteer my efforts on the weekends when I'm not working to analyze the data and make an animation showing what the boats did for 2 hours. I'm more than happy to do that. If you can get me the data, you have my contact information. I volunteer my efforts on part-time to help with that.
I have a fundamental question about your presentation here. You assert that Whiskey 105 was active at 8 o'clock that night.
I'm not certain. That was Jim Sanders. I'm not certain.
Okay, well, all right, now wait.
I have a fax from the...
May I see it?
I'm certain that Whiskey 105 was activated that day.
Okay.
I remember that fact. I don't know if it's activated at 8
Are you
o'clock.
certain that it was active when TWA 800 went down?
Well, Jim Sanders says yes. I don't have. I'm not going to make any definite answer unless I have the paper in front of me because I can't recall at this time. But I
The
know.
government has never disputed it. What they have done is hung up on the reporter that tried to get a reasonable response out. And this was Kallstrom's right-hand man that did it. It wasn't some flunky over in Washington, D.C.
Now, Mr. Sanders wrote a book on the downing of Flight 800 in which he recounted a request from the Navy to the FAA to set up a special operating area offshore of Atlantic City and that all civilian air traffic be restricted from that area.
The special area. Yeah, we have the facts.
And the assertion in the book was that that area was activated at 8 o'clock on the night that TWA went down, July 17.
Do you know?
Now, the FAA and the military routinely use time references based on Greenwich Meridian Time or Universal Time Coordinate or Zulu. Typically Zulu is 5 hours off Eastern Time, except in July, when it's 4 hours off Eastern Time. So it turned out that the box that supposedly was activated at 8 o'clock on July 17th was not in fact activated until 4 hours off Zulu, which was 9 o'clock.
No, all of this garbage.
Let me answer that first.
And gone through, and the Navy had to back off of that nonsense. They tried to say that. They got into a fight with the press enterprise about it. They lost the fight.
Well, it's not nonsense. It's based on the document that you included in your book.
No, all of this is old news. The government lost that fight. They put what you're saying out there, they lost that fight.
But the documents that you included in your book had a time reference of 0100 Zulu on 18 July for the box to be activated. 0100 Zulu 18 July is 2100 Zulu 17 July on the East Coast. That's 9 o'clock. That's 29 minutes after 800 went down.
Can I ask?
I'm happy to go get all the documentation, talk to Dave Hendricks, ship it all over to you. This is
you've got the facts.
Can I ask a question to you? Are you challenging the fact that Whiskey 105 was not activated on the day of the tragedy? Or
No,
let me finish.
Your assertion is
my question.
Your
please,
assertion is what were those boats doing in that hot activated military area?
Right.
When all the civilian traffic should be staying away from there.
No, you're putting words in my mouth. I'm saying what are all those ships doing in a military warning zone which was activated on the day of the crash?
Okay, well, I apologize. You didn't say that. Mr. Irvine said that. What were the boats doing in that hot area?
And I think he was quoting Mr. Sanders.
Okay. So the possibility may exist that the area didn't become hot until 29 minutes after 800 went down. And in fact, if the area is not hot, there's no restriction on civilian traffic transiting the area.
That isn't an issue. I mean, you can discuss that. I'd be happy to get your...
If you think that these are civilian boats, then you can go ahead and write that, but...
The government tried to make it an issue. They got caught trying to make it an issue. They were wrong. They shut their mouth about it and haven't said anything.
Well, we've got the facts there. What time does the fax request activation of Whiskey 105?
All the facts.
I have them. Let me say, I have one of 3 faxes. I was told this was one of 3. I got it in a hurry last week, and they didn't give me the one that I wanted. But this reads unclassified. It's a warning that's faxed out by Department Agency Navy. But it says it's subject to, for this particular one, it ends. It's a Narragansett Bay warning. But firing exercises hazardous to surface vessels may be conducted following times and locations in the NBOA warning, during subject week. And this is dated 15 to 21 July. Like I say, this is for Narragansett Bay. Now, I believe Dave Hendricks has he did a lot of Freedom of Information requests. He has a lot of stuff. I believe that Dave Hendricks has the other ones in the set.
The data I have is what I have. I'm sticking by it. I'm not trying to speculate, okay? I think it's your job to go find out what happened. I'm a physics student in Tallahassee. You shouldn't be asking me these questions. I know this is the press conference that I'm here and I'm presenting data, but this is not my profession. I mean,
I don't have all the answers. These questions, I think, should be addressed to the NTSB. I think the...
Well, I'm asking
let
you
me
questions
finish,
because you're urging us to go to
Let me-
the
I'm-
NTSB and
I'm
ask
not finished.
questions, and your data appears to be wrong.
All right, what I was going to say was if you ask the NTSB...
Wait a minute, hold it.
Wait.
Time out.
No, let me finish.
The data he presented had nothing to do with the warning area.
Come to the podium, Bill. Bill, I can't hear you. Let me say something first.
Look, warning areas are scheduled, as Mr. McKenna is suggesting. I know exactly where he's going with this, okay? There are several ways that notice goes out. Notice to airmen, notice to mariners go out sometime in week blocks. If you know in the military that you're going to fire F-14 air-to-air gunnery off of Virginia Beach, and you're going to do it every week, starting at Monday at 8 o'clock in the morning, you block out that warning area, and you put the appropriate notices up. I don't have the same confidence, because I didn't get into this, about whether that warning area was hot or not. My personal belief is that it probably was not. The only thing I recall from the data that I looked at was that there was a P3 operation in conjunction with the submarine dropping sonobuoys. Not a particularly hazardous operation, but still one that requires a warning area to be activated. Okay? What we're doing is we're in what the aviators call a luftberry. Everybody's turning for everybody's tail, and we're not paying attention to the big problem, or big program here. This data was not presented. The FBI is in control of who the identities are on these ships and boats.
Bill, you're forgetting one thing. I'm sure you haven't forgotten it. But James Kallstrom told me on September 10 of last year, and I've tape recorded the conversation, that 3 of those ships, Mark, 3 of those ships that were close to the shore were Navy vessels on a classified maneuver. Those are 3 of the ships that were on this one. Now, that is out of the lips of James Kallstrom, the FBI, who headed the investigation for the FBI.
I agree. I've got the tape. You're right. That's what he said.
I mean, what are we to believe about that? Now, let me point out something else. Nobody here has explained or commented, and I'd like to ask you guys that know about these things, what in the hell was that airplane doing, going back and forth? What kind of plane was it? Anybody got an idea? What did you say the speeds were? 100 knots up to 250 knots?
Let me answer it, yeah. The speeds were, they accelerated from 100 knots to 300 knots in 30 seconds.
What can do that? Anybody know? Mr. McKenna, you are an aviation specialist. Do you know?
A lot of aircraft can do that. Commander Donaldson, I mean, there's, a KC-10 could do that. I mean, 300.
No, I mean, I'm not asking speculation. I'm asking for information.
When you go,
yeah, sure.
Yeah, I've listened to this on 3 or 4 occasions, and I'd like to make several points. In the first place, the gentleman next to me used the term "the government." When I was in the Pentagon all the time, everything that came up, people would say, "They did it." The Pentagon, they did it. And I never did find that guy they. The whole 4 years I was up there. And it's the same way, who in the hell is the government when you talk about the government? The point is that the government created the agencies that apparently are not completely cooperating. The FBI and the acts of the board and so on, and certain of the communication capabilities. And I don't think you're going to get at the bottom of this. We've got an awful lot of evidence, but no decisions today. And it's going to have to be handled, and as I said, the very first time I ever went to one of these meetings, it's going to have to be a congressional investigation, a formal congressional investigation. I know there have been a few passes at the information, but I mean a bona fide government investigation where when they call the FBI up, the FBI come running up. Otherwise, they'll get their budget cut. And that goes through the whole system. And so I think what you gentlemen have said is very interesting. I think it's very instructive. I think it's very important. But to put all these things together is going to have to be done by not just the government, but individuals in the government that have the authority to get and authenticate the information. Now, so far as the Navy firing a missile, I can tell you right now, the Navy never has a firing exercise. As has already been said, we don't put out the notice to airmen and the notice to mariners, et cetera, et cetera. But also you have to have a target. Generally speaking, from an operational point of view, we just don't take a $1 million missile out there and shoot it willy-nilly up in the air. You've got to have a target to see whether or not you succeeded, and you've got to have a control for that target so it don't wander off into the center of New York or something. And so all of these things, I think, have got to be explored in more detail. And it has to be done so that when the investigator calls up a witness, that witness shows up and knows that he's in difficulty if his data isn't correct. And we don't have the agencies of the government quarreling back and forth among themselves. In the first place, there's no question about the fact that an airplane was shot down. There's no question about the fact that that airplane makes that same flight practically every day. There's no question about the fact that there was, I don't know, hundreds of witnesses saw what was clearly a rocket rise from the surface of the sea, apparently, and strike the aircraft. And there are other indications as to what kind of warhead it was, and sometimes we see orange flames come out of it and white flames in front of it, and so on. But I would hope that you could get enough data from this meeting that you could stimulate the Congress to call a congressional investigation on this affair.
I've never succeeded in 30 years in stimulating a congressional investigation, Tom.
What's that?
I've never in 30 years succeeded in stimulating a congressional investigation, and I don't expect to, but I think the gentlemen of the press might be able to do that if they would get on the case.
Admiral,
I know that we have a congressional investigation being talked about for the Waco case, and I guess the reason for that is that Congressman Barr took an interest in it, and he spoke to Dan Burton about it, and Dan Burton apparently is thinking about investigating it. But you've got a lot of friends up on the Hill. I think you could maybe work over some of them and get them to...
Well, thanks. Everybody, I'm retired.
So am I. But you still got a lot of friends, Tom. You know a lot more people than I do. Probably play golf with some of them.
That's what I think ought to be done. If you're going to, otherwise we're going discussing these things back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and finally they'll dribble over their rod.
Well, I think we've had some extremely important information laid out here today with this radar data. I think it's really an eye opener. It's an eye opener in two ways: to see all those ships, and to see the fact that the like the government will say specifically, the NTSB, with the cooperation of the FBI, keeping this secret for 3 years. Must be some reason for that. If they had nothing to, I mean, it was simply fishing boats that were out there. Hell, why would they put it out? Why are they hiding it? Why, when Kelly didn't make it to this meeting, I guess, did she? Oh, is she? Where is she? Kelly, where are you? Oh, yeah, you are. You've been here all the time? Standing up there? I'm sorry, I would have thought you would have said something by now. Do you want to say anything about your meeting with Mr. Goltz the other day? It was reported in the Washington Post? No. No. Was it a pleasant meeting? Did he say, gee, I'm sure glad that you got that information that we have had out there for how long has it been out there, McKenna? I mean, how long has this radar data been available to the public, did you say?
Well, your folks have said it's been available since April of '98.
Yeah.
I have a question for Admiral
Yeah,
Moore,
but you
though.
said it's been, somebody said that it's been available for 2 years or something like that, didn't you?
That wouldn't have been me.
Wouldn't have been you. Well,
But
I mean, here we got-
Admiral Moore, a question for you, if you wouldn't mind, sir. If it's true, as you say, that there's no question this airplane was shot down, why is the Navy continuing to participate in a cover-up of that fact? Well, the Navy was the agency that recovered the wreckage. They were Navy ordnance divers that brought the stuff up.
Let me intercede for the Admiral, Mr. McKenna. What you've done here is, this is a sort of a switch and bait kind of a question. The fact that the Navy was ordered to recover the aircraft has nothing to do, they have no responsibility to go public with whether the aircraft was shot down. In fact, if they did, they'd be violating, I'm sure, a standing order to even discuss.
Even 3 years after the fact, in the face of denials by the FAA and NTSB?
Well, the point is that the only military organization that had the expertise from China Lake Naval Air Weapons Facility recommended in formal written English that they detonate warheads in the inboard tank. That's been ignored. They also recommended live missile firings at the inboard tank. And the quote, I'll paraphrase, is to make absolutely certain this aircraft was not downed by a missile. That expert, Mr. Richard Bott, believed, looking at the wreckage, the only possibility from what he saw was an impact on those inboard tanks and an explosion as we described earlier. Now, he's one expert, but he's the only one that the FBI, that I can find with a written report. It was done by the military, a military civilian expert, and it was not acted on. That's egregious to me. 230 people died. It's probably the 27th airliner shot down worldwide by these systems that are a threat to you and me when we fly overseas, particularly in Africa and in Asia. Anywhere there's a civil disorder and you're in a large aircraft and close enough to in range to these weapons, it's a safety issue. Regardless of what happened to Flight 800, it's being ignored. There were a total of 7 recommendations in that thing, in that report, and every single one of them focused tightly on the opening statement is we've got a problem, shoulder-fired weapons. And they recommended military-civilian liaison at the engineering level to develop systems to defeat these weapons. You can buy a Chinese Vanguard right now in the weapons bazaars for $50,000, and it may be better than a Stinger.
Well, that may be true, but I mean, the logic of your case, the logic of your argument here seems to just leave no other conclusion than that if there's a government cover-up of a shoot-down of this airplane, and there were 3 agencies involved in the investigation.
No, the Navy did not investigate.
Well, I'm sorry, but the Navy had ordnance divers bringing the stuff up. The wreckage was examined on Navy ships. It was held on Navy ships for extended periods.
You're assuming,
so why is it that the Navy's the only one escaping finger pointing here?
No.
And why haven't naval officers stepped forward and said, there's something wrong with this investigation? There's no reason to believe this was an accident. Somebody brought this plane down.
The whole point of the China Lake report was specific to what you're asking, and that is that it's difficult to identify from wreckage a missile that weighs 25 pounds when it hits the airplane without knowing the fingerprint on the aircraft. And the entire thrust of that one civil servant's good piece of work, which it was very couched in diplomatic language because he had a tiger by the tail. But the bottom line is a Navy diver only sees airplanes when they're broken up, and he's ordered to go get them. He doesn't even live around airplanes.
Yeah, but Bill, I mean, here you are, retired. You've devoted a lot of time to this investigation. Are you suggesting that there's nobody in the Navy that knows as much about this as you do?
Certainly.
Or even more about it than you do, with the access to the information that they have?
Oh, I'm sure that Jay Johnson knows a lot that he can't talk about. He's on active duty.
Well, why can't they talk about it? I mean, who's telling them they can't talk about it? The White House?
Commander, I've read allegations of a White House executive order that was allegedly signed in March of 1997.
March 10th, yes.
Specifically exempting Navy personnel who had anything to do with this operation from the whistleblower.
Just to salvage. just
Can
a
you
salvage.
confirm or deny that?
That's an accurate statement. It was signed at a rather volatile time during the investigation, but it took away whistleblower status for a series of units, including the ones that were out there. Now, what does that mean to the average sailor? Probably not much, but it does mean something to civil servants who are in those units. And the reason I'm saying that is I have an intercept on a phone call, not a recording, but I have the evidence a phone call was made from the White House by the President to one of those civil servants that essentially wanted a particular ship, Navy ship, to get to the scene immediately because Mr. Clinton, in his own words, was very disturbed that the New York State Police divers would get to those black boxes before the Navy secured the site. Now, I mean, how the Navy works for the President of the United States. It doesn't work for Congress. It has to deal with Congress, but the chain of command is to the Commander-in-Chief. It is a serious, extremely serious allegation for any Navy officer or any Army officer or anybody else in the military to make any statement that impugns the integrity of the President of the United States. I can only do that because I'm retired and I'm still on shaky grounds.
Let me get in this because I think the initial question was, as far as the Navy is concerned, is when did you stop beating your wife? All of a sudden, we are trying to make the Navy a culprit in this thing, and what we're really getting to is why doesn't somebody say how that airplane was brought down and who did it? And all I am saying about the Navy is the Navy didn't bring that airplane down. I'm certain of that. Absolutely certain. But if you people in the press want to get to something, go to the CIA and find the person that drew the diagram to show that airplane climbing after it was hit or after it lost its engines and lost its nose, climbing 2,000 feet, and then go find any swept-wing jet pilot, of which Commander Donaldson is one, and I'm one, and all of us will say that is and Captain Mundo over here, that's absolutely impossible. Say, would that person who drew that diagram be willing to be put in a swept-wing jet that lost its power with an ejection seat that wouldn't work until he got 2,000 feet above it?
Well,
that's the question.
That's a great
If
question.
somebody is doing that, and somebody did that, that's because they're trying to cover up something. And there might be a good reason for it, but don't blame the Navy until you find out.
Well, Mark, I agree with you, except for one thing. I mean, you know that. Tom knows that. Bill knows that. There must be hundreds of people in the Navy that know that that was a stupid thing that the CIA did. I mean, it was an incredible thing that they did. But I haven't heard anybody officially in the Navy or anywhere else in the government who's been willing to say that. In fact, you know, I just...
I don't think the Navy was the active person or the active organization.
Well, they may not have been, but you would think that at least some of your friends or somebody would come along and say privately, Jesus, what a joke that is.
Under highly classified operations all the time. You gotta remember that. The CUs,
Yeah,
I don't
but-
have to tell you that. Go
Well-
to the Army, Delta Force, and so forth.
I've participated in top secret operations in the Mediterranean against...
Well, you're changing the subject. I wasn't talking about anything classified. I'm talking about the CIA and the FBI getting together and saying, let's perpetrate this fraud on the American people at the cost of however much it costs to make that video. And nobody in the government, nobody in the military, nobody in the Air Force, anywhere, has come out and said, what an asinine thing they did.
Yeah, but you can't say this fraud without knowing whether it's fraud or not.
What,
That's
the
point
CIA
he's
thing?
making.
Well, that's what Mark just
making.
said. He
So
said there's no swept-wing pilot that wouldn't say this is ridiculous.
it is ridiculous.
That's a fraud.
And if, again, if we had a congressional investigation, maybe we could determine the fact it was a fraud. But just like this gentleman down here, he starts out asking me a question about why did the Navy cover up?
Yeah.
I mean, he's kicking off from a fact, imagined fact. And he asks this question based on an imagined fact. I want to see him prove it, and then I'll ask the question.
Well, my question, having spent a lot of time in the government, is, and we've had these stories, and that you can't cover things up because somebody will say something. What I'm driving at is, okay, there must be hundreds and hundreds of people in the Air Force, the Army, the Navy that know that CIA video is nonsense. But none of them have come forward, Mark, and said so.
No, I just did. There are a lot of people.
You're retired, yeah. I'm talking about people on active duty.
Oh, I've heard him say it. I've heard him say it.
Publicly?
Why do you have
Publicly?
Why do you have to do everything publicly?
Well, otherwise it has no reverberation, no impact.
Reed, if you do that publicly, you're resigning.
Why?
Because you're without
Telling the truth is to get kicked out of the service?
You want a straight answer? Yes.
Let me give you an example. People on active duty can't go willy-nilly back and forth and say, hey, so-and-so is doing something wrong and so on. Now, we had a young lieutenant not too long ago who was in a squadron with this girl that got killed.
Hultgren.
You know all about that.
Yep.
And finally, he did what you said, why don't somebody do this?
Oh.
And he's out of the Navy.
Hey, I gave a talk before this meeting, man. I said exactly that same thing. That
All right, but
for people, whistleblowers do not get rewarded. They get punished.
Then you turn around and say, why don't somebody stand up and
No,
you just said that.
No.
And so the point is, if they want to stay in the service, they're not going to go around saying all kinds of things just to get the name in the paper.
No, well, it's not to get their name in the paper. I mean, Mark was making the point that you can't cover things up. He said very strongly you couldn't cover anything this big up.
No, but there's a word in the Navy called discipline.
Yeah.
And if you have a affair going on, like this particular one, and several agencies and departments and so on are involved in it, you happen to be in your section or your division, have a piece of it, you can't run out and say to the media, look what these guys are doing, I'll get those bastards, you know. You can't do that. What you suggest is dreamland. If a young lieutenant is not going to run out and make a statement about what his...
I agree with you. That's what I've been saying all along, but I don't think that's what Mark was saying.
No, that is. You're confusing special operations with an accidental Navy situation. That's what I'm trying to differentiate between the two. It's possible that SEALs, Delta Force, and so forth can be part of an operation that have to keep quiet. That's what they're there for, and we know that. But remember, the reason I got in this to begin with was because for the first time since 1911, we saw an aircraft accident in the Navy covered up and twisted and lied about from the highest places in the United States government. Right. From the Secretary of the Navy on down, and that was Kara Hultgren killed on the Lincoln.
Right.
I knew what happened within, I would say, 3 hours of that. And it came from inside. We knew she was flying the best airplane in that squadron.
Right.
We knew what was going on with other pilots, the one we called co-pilot B, or pilot B. And it has come out. But it did, as Admiral Moore said, cost Patrick Jerry Burns his stripes and his career.
Right.
And that's the price you pay.
But you and I can agree that he did the right thing.
Yeah, but you're looking at two people that paid that price.
Yeah.
Willing to pay it. Admiral Moore did. And that was in the business of the F-111 Navy version. We have any number. I've written about it.
Yeah.
The Revolt of the Admirals was an example. But you got to start from the top down. And this is what the press has missed.
Yeah.
They're looking for some underling. Go from the top.
Well, except you said Jerry Burns was not the top. He got it. He started from the bottom.
That's why I say he lost his career because he was willing to talk.
But it was the right thing to do, wasn't it?
Sir, it was.
Okay.
For him.
Yeah.
But not everyone's going to make that decision.
Very few do.
All right. Now that's what you're trying
That's
to
why
do.
That's why you get so many cover-ups.
And that's where the press comes in if they really want to find out. The problem with the press is most of the time they do everything on the phone. You ought to get up off their butts and go find out.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Gentlemen, we're getting a wind up here from the hotel for some reason. And,
Let's take a vote.
well, I sure.
Before we do that, just one thing I want to throw a point in. I'm going to make myself very unpopular here, but you know, when you originally interviewed those eyewitnesses up on Long Island, there's only one that I recall who saw the missile going up from the south going north. And all the rest that we had at that time were people who were on the shore who saw, like Paul Angelides,
right,
who saw a missile going up from close to shore going out. Now, it just happens that today, the two eyewitnesses we have both saw the missile coming from out.
Right.
Now, at that time, your position was that there were two missiles.
Right.
One from close to shore and one from out. Have you changed your position?
No, because for the same reason that we have data that supports the inshore shot. What I'm trying to, I don't know what I did state it on camera or whatever before, but in the 6 or 7 months since we did that report, the preponderance and overwhelming preponderance of evidence supports the second shot far more than the inshore shot.
Well,
now,
well, wait a minute. I mean, that is, it seems to me that you are now saying that those, excuse me, scores of eyewitnesses who were on the shore were not right.
no, that's precisely what I didn't say. What I'm saying is that the data is still there. But we're talking about 140 witnesses now, and to me, as an investigator, the people that are unencumbered by beach lines, houses, those that are at sea and are positioned either offshore the same distance or further offshore, and they see things, it's weighted heavier than somebody that's on the beach back a mile off the shore.
Well, you've got, as far as I know, we've got 3 witnesses. I don't know how many you got besides these 2 gentlemen and Al Geip, who saw something going up. And I'm not disputing. I don't question at all that they did see something. But I don't see how you dismiss
I haven't.
the 100 or so that were on the shore that saw something going up from offshore, going from north to south.
Well, he's saying there's...
No, that's not in the report. There are not hundreds going.
Well, I mean, you know, I don't know if it's hundreds, but scores or
right. Well,
tens, but they're, as far as I know, a lot more than I know than the 3 that we know said.
Sure.
But I'm not saying, you know, I think, personally, I think you were right the first time, that there were 2 missiles.
And I'm not denying that. I'm not backing off the first one, but I haven't had, it's like the first people I saw were the closest ones on the beach. And there was very good witness information that leads me to believe that there was a shot from close inshore.
Well, there's another reason to think that there were 2 missiles, and that is all the evidence that you put together that showed that there was a very high-powered mission that did certain things, caused the plane to pitch up, affected what the altitude showed, blew in the nose wheel doors. All this stuff couldn't have been explained by
no, not by a single missile, not by the one as described.
Plus, you've got Fred Myers saying there were 2 explosions. He saw 2 of them.
And the Mark II.
Yeah, right. Now, Admiral Moore or Captain Admiral Hill said that you know, you got to have a target. But how about the Cabot photo? That was certainly a possible target. How about the international orange part that was recovered from the wreckage that they called on TRI to send their expert back to tell them if it was a fire bee or not? It seems to me they were a little nervous about...
Well, sure. What I'm trying to convey is that you reach a certain level where you have to have a level of confidence in the evidence that you could walk into Congress or walk into a courtroom and present it as evidence, and it can't be refuted. I'm getting that confidence now on the offshore missile shot. I don't have that level on the inshore. And that's about all I can say at this point. That doesn't mean that it isn't going to get there too. So I think we need to wrap her up. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank all of you that are still here for attending.
This week on American Perspectives, radio talk show host and political commentator Michael Medved talks about the impact of mass media on society. It airs Saturday evening, 8 Eastern, on our companion network, C-SPAN. Then at 9:10 p.m. Eastern, Democratic Representatives Mark Udall of Colorado and Tom Udall of New Mexico discuss their freshman year in Congress. And at 10:25 p.m. Eastern, Marilyn Quayle, wife of former Vice President Dan Quayle, talks about the role of women in the office and at home. That's all on C-SPAN. Next, the role of Finland in the Cold War. After that, Joe Andrew, chairman of the Democratic National Committee, addresses students at George Washington University. Later, Encore Book Notes presents Nathan Miller, author of Theodore Roosevelt, A Life. Next, a discussion on the Cold War relationship